Good morning. All right. I encourage everyone to sit next to somebody who don't know, because that's how new relationships and new partnerships are. We're going to get started here in just a second. I'm going to let everyone get into their seats.
Forward, back, please.
I wanted to start by saying, wow, I am so excited to be here and so thankful that so many of you took time out of your busy schedules to be here today for our first Lacamas Watershed Symposium. A round of applause, woo! My name is Devin Rossper, and I am the new Clean Water Division Manager for Clark County Public Works. I am very happy to be back in Clark County. I think there's a lot of familiar faces in here. Many of you I met when I was working for Department of Ecology a few years ago and on the Lacamas watershed and the East Fort Lewis River. And there are a lot of new faces in this room as well. And so I really just wanted to start by saying thank you. I feel like this is homecoming, and I'm really excited to work with many of you for years to come. I also want to take a moment to acknowledge our Clean Water Commission. If you could please stand. We have our Clean Water Commission was instrumental in organizing and initiating this symposium and really encouraging us all to come together today to discuss the watershed and the lake and really to focus on what we can do to work together moving forward. With that, I would like to invite Councilor Medvigi from Clark County Council. Ooh, sorry, my clicker is not working. Oh no, there's always a technology issue, right? I would like to invite Clark County Councilor Gary Medvigi up to the podium along with City of Camas Mayor Steve Hogan to give our welcome address. And you guys can do rock, paper, scissors to figure out who goes first.
We did draw straws and Stevie had to go first.
Well, thank you all for coming here today. This was a great idea. I didn't come up with it, but it is so nice to have this take place. Welcome to the Lacamas Lodge. If it's your first time, we will make this available in the future for other meetings like this. So hopefully you'll be here a number of times. I want to thank the group that actually is it's called the Clark County Clean Water Commission that we just acknowledged, and the County Council. And then within the county, there are so many departments that have been involved with this lake for decades that basically just think of the whole county has been working on this. And we have a great water quality experts at the county that hopefully will keep focusing on this and other lakes too. One of the things I'd like to point out from the City of Camas's point of view is that we are really anxious to have partnerships. And there are a number of organizations that were invited here, and I don't know how many organizations are actually represented, but we need everybody to be interested in these three lakes. We have an opportunity for real recreational improvement here in the City of Camas's opinion, and we need your help. Many of you have been around water for a long time, and so I think of you as subject matter experts. I am not a water quality expert, but we do know how to get some money, and we are anxious to work with good ideas. The way the City of Camas normally works, we try to go with federal and state and county agencies, even ports, but we also work with nonprofits. There's some nonprofits organizations here and we want to work with you also. When we originally had the first blooms that I knew of, 2 of them occurred in 2018. And then 4 of them occurred in 2019. And then 2020 came, and it was habitual algae blooms that took place. And that's when the city council decided we had to step up. We worked with our public works director, Steve Wall, and we've worked on plans that has finally come to fruition this year. We immediately started as a city going to Olympia. And out of Olympia, we got enough money to put our first project together, but we had to work with the Department of Ecology. And so the money comes from ecology, so the rules come from ecology. And it turned out to be longer than we thought it was going to take to get new data to update the other years. Jeff Schnabel, thank you for all the work you've done over the last decades. But we wanted to update that data so that we knew what we were going to be faced with and had a logical idea of how to move forward cleaning these 3 lakes. The Department of Ecology in 2021 told us it would be done with the watershed aspect of this, their part of our study in May of 2023. They're getting close to being finished, hopefully by the end of the year. And we want to marry those 2 studies up. So I'm asking you to look at both studies when we finally get them so that we can prioritize how we're going to improve this whole system, the watershed and the lakes. So thank you for being here. Thank you for putting this together today. And I'm going to turn it over to Councilmember Nevich.
Good morning, everyone. So let me just first start out by saying, I don't really know what I'm going to say yet, but I'm going to say it from the heart and directly to everyone here. So I'm going to give you a little history from my point of view as to where we're at. And I am likewise excited, although I don't typically do at Yahoo's. Too much time on the bench and in the military has kind of made me a staid person. But first and foremost, I want to thank my fellow counselors from Clark County for being here. And if you don't know me, I am the vice chair of the Clark County Council. I'm now the longest sitting Clark County Councilor, which is hard for me to believe. But let me just start with that, with the counselors. You know, when I live just north of the lake, probably about, as the bird flies, maybe a mile off the lake. I use it to recreate. And I moved to Lacamas because I love this area and it's gorgeous. And I see the possibilities with the lake. And from time to time, I talk to our own staff about, hey, I grew up in New Jersey. You know, they're putting raw sewage in the Hudson, dumping barges off the coast. It's all flowing back in on the New Jersey shore. You know, I told about those horror stories of seeing pollution that was rampant. People just didn't know any better. But the import of the story wasn't that I lived through that environmental disaster, but that it was remediated. It was actually fixed. Before I graduated high school, all of that had pretty much ceased. We can do this. We can improve things. That was the moral and the reason that I would tell that story about how I grew up in the New Jersey, near New York City. So years ago, when I first started, I wanted to get involved in Lake Vancouver and Lacamas Lake and cleaning up our watersheds because I knew that was necessary in order to clean up our lakes. And boy, does government move slowly And I was also hearing from a lot of the local neighborhood scientists about issues here at Lacamas Lake that could be low-hanging fruit to correct. Now, obviously, there's always short-term, mid-term, and long-term striving to clean something up. But the issue is we need to start with a goal, with a vision, to state how we want to end up. And that'll be our legacy 10 years from now, 20 years from now, whether we succeeded focusing on Lacamas Lake. So with the council, I was a lone voice until I wasn't. Finally, we did have 5 that agreed a few years ago that, because the issue was we have so many underlapping and overlapping jurisdictions, between DNR and ecology and the county and the city, going on and on. And we have a lot of interest here with our lands division and our parks. RCO conserved a lot of land here in partnership with us. We have a lot of interest in the recreation, and I know all of this, but some of these lakes were here at the end of the ice age. When the Missoula ice dams broke, it formed some of these lakes, particularly Round Lake and Fallen Leaf Lake. It used to be called Dead Leaf Lake, or Dead Lake. Anyway, then it was dammed, and a paper mill blossomed. And then it was known as an industrial lake. But it was originally from the end of the ice age. We have a lot of geologic history here. This gorge was scoured out. Some of this area was scoured out as well. I have river rock all over my property here, probably from Montana. So our goal is to treat it as a natural lake that was enlarged by a dam, and now we have homes everywhere and people rely on it for recreation. And the back-to-back-to-back algae blooms, as the mayor outlined, were devastating, especially people with pets or small children that just didn't want to venture into the pretty toxic water. You read the neighborhood blogs about, well, it's always been a dirty lake, it's always been an industrial lake, but it's not now. And let's have objective to add clarity to the water, eliminate the algae blooms as much as we can, at least shorten their lifespan. We need to have a deeper layer of oxygenated water for aquatic life for us, before that stratified layer sits in. We need to have specific goals as to what we want to achieve. So those are my goals. A healthier water body that's cleaner to look at, that's healthier to bathe in or touch with all the recreation that's going on there, and to have less signs posted that the water is hazardous to your health. So the council now, and we did vote a few years ago to have an interlocutory, because we knew we needed to bring all those disparate government agencies together and all their resources. And did I mention the Corps of Engineers? They're out there too. We need to sit around the table constantly. So this is the time to start taking action on a lake management plan. So all of your input will be vital to get this draft plan into its final form so that we can achieve these goals. Because it's going to take all of us. And I do want, so thank you to the Clean Water Commission for all you do every day. We're going to emphasize some things throughout the year, and that's another byproduct of this process, to educate the public how vital clean water is to us, to each and every one of us. We have a conservation district. I want to highlight their work, because this is all about manure management, failed septic systems, use of fertilizers without constraint. Most people don't know about the phosphorus loading and the fact that our lake bottom now is saturated with phosphorus. It's a key and expensive problem to remediate, and it's going to take years, because I don't think we're going to be able to dredge it all up and excavate it. We're going to have to treat it in other ways. So we have to educate the public, and it's everything from domestic animals to manure, proper control of manure throughout the watershed. And as was mentioned, we have 80% of the watershed in the county. So this is going to be a hard pull with your neighbors to continue the education process. So it's going to take unity of effort, clear objectives, and bringing everyone in to contribute to cleaning up our lake. So welcome to this first symposium. I'm hoping that we do end up with a great plan, and it's going to take all of your input to do that. And again, thank you to my Clark County councilors, because ultimately this is going to be long range. It's going to cost a lot of money, hopefully someone else's money. But and as the mayor said today, Lacamas knows how to get grants, but it's going to be a long haul. But hopefully in the short run we can get rid of the outflows.
Thank you. That was inspiring. Thank you again to Mayor Hogan and to Councilor Medvigi and to all the elected officials for being here today. I also want to again recognize our Clean Water Commission, and this is a quick plug too, as many of you may be aware that we are currently recruiting for our Clean Water Commission. So if you're inspired by this event and interested in getting involved, we have 3 positions that are open. You're welcome to apply by November 2nd, and I encourage you, if you are interested, to talk with one of our commissioners in the room today to learn more about what our commission does. I also want to say thank you to the City of Lacamas for having us here today. They also sponsored the coffee and pastries this morning. They're the real heroes. I'm still drinking coffee. And what a beautiful lodge. You can look out these windows and see the lake that we're going to be talking about today. So there's not a better place that we can all team together. Thank you again to City of Camas, and to Steve Wall, who is here today from Public Works. Also want to say thank you to all of our attendees. And I want to do a little exercise just so we can get a feeling of who's in the room. So I want to acknowledge all the nonprofit organizations in the room. If you're from a nonprofit organization, can you please stand up? It's a hard work. Thank you to landowners, and thank you so much. I know we have multiple groups in the room today. If you are from local government, from a municipality or a county or a conservation district, can you please stand up? And then I know we have lots of state government partners in here today. If you are from a state government, can you please stand up? I know we have Ecology and Fish and Wildlife, maybe some others. And do we have any federal government representatives? Great, thank you so much for being here. I appreciate it on behalf of Marie for us. Thank you so much. And then finally, our elected officials, if you are on a commission or an elected official or a board member, could you please stand up and be acknowledged? Awesome. And then if you are a volunteer community member, someone who just came today because you're really passionate about clean water, we also want to acknowledge you. Would you please stand up? Thank you. Fantastic. So moving on, just a few housekeeping and logistic things. I wanted to just start with some of our goals and desired outcomes for today. So our goal is really to establish a shared understanding of the science and data that is driving management decisions in the watershed and the lake. So that is the #1 core goal, is that everyone leaves here today with a shared understanding. 2, to talk about and identify focus areas for future implementation and investment, which we'll be focusing on in the afternoon portion of the agenda. 3 is really to inspire a call to action and a continued call for coordination, which I think we can all get behind and appreciate. And then finally, just confirming that we all have a mutual responsibility for clean water, whether you have a dog, whether you live in the watershed, you're a donor, you volunteer, you're a funder, we all have a mutual responsibility and we're a part of the clean water puzzle. So how are we going to achieve those goals for today? Our agenda is as follows. The morning will be focused on the data and the science. Up first, we have Clark County focusing on the stream health report and the work we do across the county to monitor clean up water quality. Then we have the Department of Ecology here to talk about what they've been doing in the Lacamas watershed related to their source assessment and advanced restoration plan. We'll take a quick break, and then we have Lacamas Watershed Council here today to talk about the work that they've been doing in the lake. And then we'll pass it to Camas to talk about the lake management plan. So really our goal is to start at the watershed level and then zoom into the lake that is right outside of our window. And then after lunch, we will transition into focusing on implementation. And we have the Watershed Alliance here, as well as Clark Conservation District. And then we'll have a break followed by our panel where you can ask questions, and then we'll have open discussion really focused on what's next and what we can all commit to for clean water. I did want to mention we do have a minor agenda change because we're taking that watershed to lake focus. We have a short presentation on fallen leaf lake work done by the county that will happen after the Lacamas Watershed Council and before Camas, just so that we can make sure we're highlighting that. We thought it would make more sense to move them up when we are closer to the lake conversations. So some housekeeping, I just wanted to mention the restrooms are in the back. Please help yourself to water or refreshments. If you brought a reusable water bottle, you can just go in and fill it up in the sink if you want. We also have bottled water available. Please silence your cell phones. Thank you. Take breaks as you need. There's also a small room just behind here if you have to take a phone call or go check your email. You're welcome to go in there as needed. I do want to call out an emergency meeting point in the event that we have to vacate the building. Let's hope that doesn't happen. The park, Heritage parking lot, some of you may have parked in there. There's a playground over there. That will be our meeting spot in the event that we need to leave. If you have not signed in, that's how we get reimbursed for the food. Please sign in. And we also, you may have got a sticker indicating that you registered or if you have a special dietary restriction. So please sign in and check in with Alice up front. And then we do have time for Q&A after each of the presentations, so please hold your questions until appropriate times. Okay, now for the ground rules. Every big meeting needs them. I'd like to encourage everyone to speak up, but also make space for others. And what that means is please limit your comments and questions to about 3 minutes each. There's a lot of you. We only have a small amount of time for questions and discussion, so please make space for others. Attack the problem, not the people. It's okay to disagree, but always assume positive intent and let's stay focused on where we agree and where we can work together versus stay focused on where we disagree. And it's okay to not have all the answers yet. If you ask a question and somebody doesn't have an answer, it's probably just because we don't know, and that's okay. We're working on this together, and we appreciate that grace. Another thing I wanted to mention, this is election season. Please no campaigning. We would appreciate it if you're involved with like a private product. Please no marketing. We would like to just stay focused on clean water. We do have a parking lot if topics come up that diverge us a bit from Lacamas and water quality that we will be putting items on the flip chart there. I also encourage you to get to know your neighbor at your desk, and I hope everyone meets somebody new today, and just keep remembering that we are in this together. And finally, there are people joining us remotely. This meeting is being recorded. Virtual guests can use the chat tool to participate in the discussion. There's an icon here that you can click on to enter your comments, and questions and comments will be held until the Q&A portion of the event. And our communication staff, Haley, and Haley, our public information officer, will help facilitate that. And real quick, can we just give it up for them because they're the real hero, making sure all the technology works and everyone can join online. So without further ado, I think it's time to get started. I would now like to welcome up somebody who I've been working with for many years, and now I'm a part of her team. I'd like to invite Marley Milosevic Butler to come talk about Clark County Stream Health Report.
Hi, everyone. Oh, did it already go ahead?
Is that okay? I want to make sure people can hear you, so. There may be a chance that it doesn't work, that you have to stay with the slide.
Oh, sorry.
I'll just point to them.
Okay, I can do that. So hi, everyone. I'm Marlon Milosevic. I'm a natural resource specialist with Clark County Clean Water Division. I've been with the county 8 years now, almost, I think. And I'm going to be talking to you guys about our stream health report. Why do we study streams? Clark County streams range from stormwater runoff dominated to relatively natural water bodies. So we have a wide range of different types of creeks in our county. We study streams to identify areas of concern for future stream restoration projects. And we also use that study to describe water quality trends over an extended time period. And then finally, we collect the data to be able to put together our stream health report. You got it. Sorry, guys. So the importance of stream monitoring data. We use the monitoring data to assess current stream health status for beneficial use status support. We also provide data for internal stormwater planning, including watershed assessment, targeted outreach, stormwater capital, and basin planning. We also support regional initiatives, such as the Lower Columbia Fish Recovery Board's Watershed Management Plan, Salmon Recovery Plan, and Department of Ecology TMDLs. We also share our data with stakeholders and local partners, like the City of Camas, our Conservation District, and the Department of Ecology. Clark County assessment of avoidable streams. So we started collecting data throughout the Clark County back in 2002. So from 2002 to 2022, we have 20 years of environmental data. That is a lot of data that we've collected over a long time frame. Our project, we have 9 long-term index sites, and we go to those sites every year, once a month, and so we're always visiting these sites, and they're located throughout the county at our major sites. We also sample 42 additional sites through our rotating panel, which has 5 rotating panels that we visit once every 5 years. And again, that's 1 time a month for the whole year. And when I say year, I'm talking about water year. And so our water years are a little bit different than the calendar year. They run from October through September. So this is a map of, This is a larger map of where all of our stream sites are. Orange dots are where our index sites are. Those are the ones that we visit every year. And then we have our rotating panel sites, which are the yellow dots. And those rotating panels are usually about 9 to 11 sites, and they're usually grouped by watershed. And those are spread throughout the county as well. So if there's a creek in the county, we are sampling it at some point. So when I say we're sampling it, we're collecting data to calculate various indexes that give us a measure of stream health. So one of the top indices is the Oregon Water Quality Index. So that's our water quality measurement. That's our grab sample out of the stream, actually measuring the water quality that we send to the lab. And then we also have instrumentation that we put directly in the stream to get live data. So part of that Oregon Water Quality Index, we collect bacteria, nutrients, temperature, DO, and a few other ones. And then we also collect turbidity and metals to compare to state standards, not part of the WQI. So we collect a lot of different parameters that all give us information about stream health. The next indice that we sample for is us collecting aquatic insects or bugs, as I like to say. We collect the benthic invertebrate index of biological integrity, which is the BIBI. And that is a one-time-a-year sample that we collect in the summertime, scrubbing rocks in the creek. And why that index is very important is because those bugs live in the creek year-round. So they're actually exposed to water quality constituents all year long. Whereas when we go and take our graph samples for the OWQI, that's a snapshot in time. The BIBI helps give us an idea of what's happening all the time in the creek. And then also, what helps us get that BIBI score up is having good types of bugs such as your mayfly, stonefly, and caddisfly. Something that shows bad water quality for bug health would be having tolerant taxa because they can withstand pollution more. That's just kind of what goes into the indice. We also sample, we measure stream flow and precipitation throughout the county as well. And we measure continuous summer stream temperatures that help us know how hot the creek's getting in the summertime. Our next slide is about our stream health report. So unfortunately, our stream health report site is down right now. I was gonna share that with you guys because it's a really cool tool. And it's one of my favorite aspects of the project itself is the stream health report. And it's got a lot of information on it, you can deep dive and see like your creek next to your house, what are the actual data points that are coming from it. So if you get a chance when our site comes back up, please go look at it. It's really cool. I really like it. But I'll give you guys a rundown of kind of how that stream health report is laid out. We have 3 interactive maps, and the first map is a status and comparison from our 2010 stream health report to our 2022 recent data. So it'll either have our oldest data that we have for a site compared to the newest site for those rotating panels that we don't get to every year. And then our second map that you can interact with is our trends data map that has our index sites that we do sample every year. So we have data from 2002 to 2020 for those trends, so almost 20 years. That gives us a really good idea that our trends analysis is strong, so we have a lot of data to back that up. And then our third interactive map has the current stream status compared to state water quality standards. And we include bacteria, DO, metals, and various other parameters that we can compare to state standards and see how our creeks are doing. So here's the county summary for the stream health report. There's a range of stream conditions across the county. The map that I have shown on the right side is a snapshot from the trends map, interactive map. And this is just showing the water quality index. So urbanized areas tend to have poor stream health. Seen by the right or the left side of the screen are the 5 more urbanized streams that we sample for index sites. For water quality trends, most of our long-term index sites do not show a change since 2002. 2 of our urbanizing sites, Curtin Creek and Cougar Creek, shown currently with poor water quality status, are showing improving trends for water quality over time, which is very interesting. And hopefully that continues. Rural areas tend to have better stream health, although many are still impacted in some way. Looking at the right side of the map, you can see our green markers, and that is indicating good stream health for status. And you can also see that they're not degrading in water quality to the trends analysis. However, pointing out Matney Creek, is an exception. It's the only creek that we have with degrading water quality, and its current status is fair. Many sites do not meet state standard for various parameters due to a single site visit. So if we sample one of the sites, say in the peak of summer, and it's outside the realm for temperature or DO, then it's not going to meet the state standard for the whole year, unfortunately. So moving on to the Lacamas watershed. We visited the Lacamas watershed in water year 2022. So that started in October of 2021, going through September 2022. On the right side, you can see the large map of Clark County and see the distribution of where our sites for Lacamas Creek were, or Lacamas watershed. And then on the, this is backwards. Sorry, guys. I've probably been saying left and right wrong this entire time. Sorry, guys. Anyways, the more blown up map is a zoomed in version so you can see exactly where our sampling sites are. So our Lacamas watershed rotating panel results. Looking at the sites, the site column, I have matched up, we go by location code numbers, and usually a lower number means that it's towards the mouth of the stream, lower, and then a higher number means that it's higher up in the watershed. We use a kind of stoplight coding system. So green means good water quality, yellow is fair, and then red is poor. So our overall health is additive between our water quality and our bug score. We have two sites that actually have overall good water quality health, and those are the Upper Fifth Plain Creek and Upper Lacamas Creek. Upper Lacamas Creek is good for both water quality and our BIBI status, where Fifth Plain Creek has fair water quality status and good BIBI status added together, gives us good overall health. We have two sites that are fair overall health, and that's Matney Creek and Shanghai Creek. Matney Creek has fair water quality status with good BIBI status, which still adds up to fair water quality overall health. And then Shanghai is fair across the board with water quality and BIBI. And then finally, we have 3 poor sites. Those are our 2 upper watershed or lower watershed locations, being Lower Fifth Plain Creek and Lower Lacamas Creek. Our Lower Lacamas Creek site is at Goodwin Road. They both have poor OWQI, but fair BIBI status, but unfortunately added together gives overall poor overall health. And then the very unfortunate site, China Ditch, is poor across the board for all 3 categories. So the Lacamas watershed summary. There is a range of stream health conditions across the watershed from poor to good. Water quality is trending worse at Matney Creek, driven by nutrients, and that is inorganic nitrogen and total phosphorus. Water quality is, BIBI is trending better at Matney Creek. 4 of the 7 sites in the Lacamas watershed did not meet the state standard for bacteria in water year 2022. And then all sites in the Lacamas watershed did not meet the state standard for dissolved oxygen in water year 2022. The highest total phosphorus concentrations tend to be in China Ditch and Plain Creek. So for future work in the Lacamas watershed, we will be back doing another rotating panel run in water year 2027, and that means we'll be there in October 26th. We're also going to be partnering with Clark Conservation District or Poop Smart Clark sampling DNA and bacteria. Carolyn will be talking more about that later today. And up next is going to be one of our ecology partners that we've shared all of our Lacamas data with, and we're excited to see their presentation. So, thank you.
Round of applause for Marley. Also want to acknowledge Bob Hutton, who's in the room, as well as Jeff Schnabel, who have supported water quality monitoring efforts for many years. Thank you. We have about 10 minutes for questions for Marley, so I will open it up for questions. Jeff, would you like to join us as well? So I'll take them by show of hands. Okay. And we'll sit in a track. I'm 16, all of you are on the
That's only dissolved oxygen, not calculating dissolved temperature.
Good question. There is a relationship between our temperatures and low dissolved oxygen. Do you have a question for Marty? No questions for that? You're there.
We have these back here, which is a story that includes our stream level reports. URL, do catch here.
Thank you, Eric. I can also acknowledge Eric is our outreach specialist. Many of you likely know him. There's a lot of different for Eric. People want out there. Any other questions for Marty? Summarize some of the land uses around the streets that maybe water quality of China. And that may also be presentation, if that's okay. If you ever heard of
That's right. It's a mix of changes in the watershed over the last decades, shifting some areas away from factories or to residential development, small farm buildings. So we used to range with this impacts. These little areas that around tiny ditch things. That's our areas that we go. It could also have something to do with farms. It does vary and accessible and get on the point. All the reasons today. Jurisdiction, focus groups. Yeah, that's a roundabout.
Thanks, Jeff. Some of you, one of the things that I think is important to think about is how big the water is in that water. So all the way out to the Russian and the Hopkinson. So when you think about what's happening here in this lake, and we are seeing water quality is really all the way out. It's far away from Canada where we are today. So again, the reason why we're all the clean water month. I do think we have a question on the lines. Yes, Haley.
All right, the question is, does Clark County have an idea of what drives the red/poor water quality levels in the China Ditch and Fifth Plain locations?
Awesome, and I'll remember this is people, so I'm gonna remember to carry this one. I think that's somewhat related to our last question. Do you want to take that, Jeff, and just feel like Dan away?
Do I just hold this one?
So specific parameters that we see driving some of the data that Marley was showing. I think what we found in China Ditch and Marley can correct me here if I get off track, in both China Ditch and Lower Fifth Point Creek, we did see low scores because of high nutrients. I think we also saw lower scores because of the temperature and dissolved oxygen levels in those streams. Those kind of go together. As we get higher temperatures, they tend to get a little lower oxygen saturation within the stream. So those two kind of work in concert. So those are probably the primary drivers that we're seeing that give you those lower scores on the water quality index. And then if you're looking at the bug scores that Marley shared, that can be more to do with, it can have to do with water quality per se, or it might be more to do with stream substrate and the habitat conditions, sedimentation, things like that that are kind of degrading some of that habitat that the bugs need. So hopefully that helps.
I think this is the last one so that we can move on to Department of Ecology. And also for those of you asking questions, please identify yourself. I think that'd be great.
Hello, I'm Thomas Griffiths, Drainage Improvement District number 5. Oversee some aspects of China Ditch as one of the ditches in our district. As part of your water sampling efforts, do you also sample the substrate?
So as part of the Label Streams program, we do not sample, we don't take a sediment sample from those streams. However, we do have our Columbia Urban Streams program where we are collecting sediment samples. China Ditch is not part of that sampling effort, unfortunately, but there are other creeks within the Lacamas watershed that we are sampling and collecting sediment samples for.
One final question.
Not a question, comment. So I want to this mirror. You know, we're waiting on Ecology's report. The pandemic threw a curveball into that study, and hopefully we will have that in December, which will help inform some of these detailed questions, whether it's point source or naturally occurring sources, from agriculture to domestic, manure control, you name it. I mean, phosphorus is an ingredient of life in the right balance. We're out of balance. And thank you, Devin, for helping get that watershed study through.
Thank you. And I can't take credit for where it is now because that is all Department of Ecology and Galen and Nate and Lawrence's work. And with that, let's give another round of applause for Marley and transition to our next speaker. All right. I'd like to invite Department of Ecology up to talk about the Lacamas Watershed Source Assessment and Advanced Restoration Plan. Okay, and this is for, so you can kind of get her here to advance.
All right, well, thanks everyone so much for coming. Can you all hear me okay? You know, I have a naturally soft voice, so I want to make sure you can hear me. I'm Galen Trant-Sinclair. I'm a hydrologist with the Department of Ecology. Relatively new, I started this position in March, and so my role in this study has sort of been shepherding the Lacamas Creek Watershed Source Assessment to its completion. So I'm going to kick us off, and then I'm going to pass it over to my colleague Nate, who's our one of our TMDL leads for Southwest Washington. And we're going to talk about the long-awaited Lacamas Creek Source Assessment Report. So what is a source assessment? This is the Department of Ecology study. It's a relatively new study type, but we're seeing more and more of these, especially in Southwest Washington. The goal of the source assessment is basically to characterize pollution in a watershed, start to see where pollution is coming from and start to identify potential sources. They're designed to be more time and cost efficient than our more complicated and modeling intensive total maximum daily load studies. Of course, when pandemic happens and we have a statewide hiring freeze for a year and a half, that can put pauses on that work. But the goal is to allow more rapid dissemination of our results for use in advanced restoration plans, which Nate's going to talk more about. A couple of recent examples are the East Fork Lewis and Bridge Creek source assessment. We're really building on some of that work from those earlier source assessments. Just a quick tour of the Lacamas watersheds I'm going to be talking about mostly today. So we are focused on Lacamas Creek. You can see it flowing from the northeast portion of the watershed, takes a turn, and then flows into Lacamas Lake. The four tributaries I'm going to talk about today are China Ditch, Creek, Shanghai Creek, and Matley Creek. And then we have a few smaller tributaries that I'm going to highlight. And those you can see kind of on the western side of the watershed. Big Ditch, Spring Branch, and Dwyer Creek. These are some small tributaries coming directly into Lacamas Creek. I want to emphasize the yellow line on this map is our study area. I want to note that it does not include the lake. I'm not going to be talking at all about the lake today. We're really looking at the sources in the watershed of pollutants. Next slide. Building off the question about land use, this map just shows this is the National Land Cover Database that the USGS puts out. You can see the size of the watershed, which was brought up before. We're moving from very forest headwaters and headwaters of Lacamas Creek and Matley Creek into a more mixed land use, which includes quite a bit of agriculture, some open space, and light development. And then, of course, we have the cities of Vancouver and Genesee over on the western portion of the watershed. So we really have a large, diverse watershed with a lot of opportunities for pollution sources. So what parameters am I going to be talking about today? This is the most recent 303D statewide list of impaired waters for the Lacamas Creek watershed. This is from the 2018 report, which was the most recent one that's been approved by the EPA. And we can see the thick red lines here indicate the water body is on the list of impaired waters. So we have temperature, dissolved oxygen, fecal coliform. We're seeing quite a few listings throughout the watershed. A couple of listings for pH. I'm not going to talk too much about that, but we can talk about that if anyone has questions. One thing you don't see on this slide is nutrients, and that's because we don't actually have a statewide water quality standard for nutrients in creeks. However, nutrients have historically been high in the watershed, and I know there's a lot of interest in it, so we did take a look at nutrients, and we're going to talk about that quite a bit today. This is our sampling sites. One thing I want to highlight is that a lot of the data I'm going to present today was taken over a decade ago. So this project was initiated in 2010. So a lot of the data I'm going to be talking about is that 2010 and 2011 data. So wherever you see a point on this map, it was sampled in 2010 to 2011. If that point is yellow, that means we also did some limited sampling of that site in 2021, and that was exclusively for bacteria sampling. So I'm going to kick us off with nutrients. We heard a little bit about nitrogen and phosphorus in the last presentation, but some concerns about high nitrogen and phosphorus, we can get eutrophication within the streams themselves. And then, of course, there are major contribution of nutrients to the downstream lane. Some of the sources we are concerned about in this watershed, they're largely non-point sources, so not a specific input of pollution, but rather more diffuse sources such as livestock, fertilizer applications, and stormwater runoff. I'm going to start with nitrogen, and then we'll do phosphorus next. And so in these maps, the larger the dots, the higher the concentration. And again, this is from our 2011, this was summer 2011 data. So what we can see is we really have an emphasis of higher nitrogen concentrations in the western and southwestern portions of the watershed. So Fifth Lane Creek, Spring Branch Creek, Lower Lacamas Creek, those kind of sites in the western part of the watershed is really where we're seeing our high total nitrogen, and nitrate values. Phosphorus is a similar story, where on the western side of the watershed is really where we're seeing those high phosphorus. We're not seeing very high phosphorus or nitrogen in our more upper parts of the watershed. We're not seeing too much in upper Lacamas Creek or in Matney Creek, but we're very much seeing high phosphorus over on the western side of the watershed. One thing I want to point out is the absolute value of these stocks. So the USGS proposes a threshold for eutrophication in streams to occur potentially at about 0.075 milligrams per liter of phosphorus. That falls in our second smallest point, our second smallest category on this map. So we're seeing phosphorus concentrations, average phosphorus concentrations as high as 0.24 to 0.3 milligrams per liter. So we're really seeing kind of remarkably high phosphorus concentration in some parts of the watershed. I'll point out in niche again, we're seeing very high phosphorus concentrations out there. Talking about land use a little bit more. So what you're seeing here is on our y-axis, this is our total nitrogen and nitrate values. On our x-axis is the percent of land in a given catchment that is in a given land use category. And what we're really seeing is in those areas where we have more development and more pasture agricultural areas, those are where we're getting the highest hits on both nitrogen and nitrates. In forested areas and the shrub and scrub areas, those where we're having more forest and more shrub and scrub, we're seeing lower nitrogen values. Similar story with phosphorus. Those areas where we have more development and more pasture-based areas, that's where we're really starting to see those high phosphorus concentrations. So just to summarize nutrients, we're really seeing consistently high nutrient values in the watershed, particularly in that western part of the watershed, including the northwestern portion of the niche area of phosphorus concentrations. And we're seeing a lot of those high nutrients associated with the developed in that more pasture and hay category. One thing that is related to nutrients is dissolved oxygen. So these are our minimum dissolved oxygen concentrations from our July and August surveys. Another thing I want to point out again, the absolute value of these dissolved oxygen concentrations. So our statewide standard puts a minimum dissolved oxygen concentration at 10 milligrams per liter. We actually don't have any sites that met that standard. Again, we're seeing our lowest dissolved oxygen values more on the western portion of the watershed, particularly in China Ditch area, and then also Spring Bridge. This could be related to nutrient uptake. So here's just graphs of our total phosphorus and orthophosphate as related to dissolved oxygen. And we are seeing that in those areas where we have higher phosphorus, we are generally seeing lower dissolved oxygen. One thing I do want to point out is some of those very low dissolved oxygen values are in China Ditch and also Spring Branch Creek. Those are two sites where we do have a complicating factor where we have groundwater coming into these sites. So we do have a potential input of low dissolved oxygen groundwater that might be complicating the story a little bit, and probably would need to do more modeling work or more detailed work to really determine exactly the contribution of nutrients versus groundwater in this area. So summarize dissolved oxygen, we're seeing all of our sites are not meeting dissolved oxygen criteria in 2011. And those lower concentrations are correlated with higher phosphorus and orthophosphate concentrations. But again, we have that complicating factor of some groundwater input in a couple of our sites. So I'm going to talk about bacteria quickly now. So this is, and I'm going to move into our 2021 data. So we have a little bit more recent data for bacteria sites. What we see here at the point is yellow. That means the site is not meeting water quality standards. There's only one site that actually is meeting water quality standards for bacteria during all of our waters that we measured, and that's Fifth Plain Creek at landmark is 0.2. The reason we think that that site is probably meeting standards when most of the rest of the sites are not is we likely have a input of groundwater at that site. So it's going back to that groundwater story a little bit. That groundwater has very low bacteria, so we think that's probably diluting some of the water coming into the surface water. We're seeing pretty high bacteria levels across the watershed. I want to point out Shanghai Creek in the upper right part of that, and Dwyer Creek, which is a small tributary that enters just above Lacamas Lake, where we were seeing our consistently highest bacteria concentrations. So up to this point, I'm talking kind of a broad picture. I want to focus in on a couple of areas that we can see a couple potential sources of bacteria. So staff in 2021 on a couple of occasions with some opportunistic samples where they saw a potential source of bacteria. And the first one we guys talked about is in China Ditch. So we have two sites here, CHD-2, CHD-1, and these are wrapping a golf course in China Ditch. That golf course later closed. Staff also observed in that right picture is some livestock, little cow circles. And they don't have direct access to the stream. However, we do have that very steep slope. And we were pretty close to the creek, and that's in a place that runoff from that manure get into the creek. So staff said both upstream and downstream of that golf course. The upstream site had a pretty low bacteria value, about 17 CFU per 100 mils. And then the site downstream sample on the same day was at about 310 CFU per 100 mils. So we are seeing on the same day there was something happening in that particular area. We had a sample in October. That was after that golf course closed, also after the first flush of rain, I believe. And that downstream site can come down to about 9 CFU per 100 milliliters. Second site I want to point out is this site in Fifth Plain Creek. This is at mile 5.5. It's there at 3 points on August 23rd, September 8th, and October 22nd. And I just want to highlight how turbid the creek is. You can see it looks like almost like chocolate milk colored, very, very turbid. I observed that to the sample, and the concentration was really quite high, about 1,300 CFUs. And in September, that turbidity had come down a little bit, but we still have a pretty high bacteria concentration. And then by October, this creek was feeling a little bit more clear, and that bacteria concentration was under 100 CFU per milliliters. Staff went upstream of this site and were unable to find exactly what that source was, but we are seeing there's some source of likely high turbidity and bacteria upstream of that site. There's you can really not see it very well, but there is a cow in this picture. That cow has direct access to that stream. So these samples were actually taken upstream of where that property is, but again, it's just a kind of ongoing story that we're seeing a lot of examples of livestock with access to streams or manure runoff able to enter streams. We talked a little bit about septic systems. I'm not going to talk too much about this, but the main thing I want to highlight is with the data we have, we're not seeing a clear relationship between bacteria concentrations in either failing septic systems, or sorry, non-compliant septic systems. That doesn't mean that they are failing. It means that they're not compliant with their current inspections or with the age of septics. So that doesn't mean that septic systems and failing septic systems are not contributing bacteria to this watershed. It means that we are not seeing a clear relationship with the data we have at this point. So that's an area that we definitely need to do more work. Summarizing bacteria, so again, in 2021, we're seeing that our E. coli concentrations are consistently not meeting standards at virtually all the sites we sampled. I can talk a little bit about this if anyone has questions. We're not seeing much change between our initial sampling and our 2021 sampling. Shanghai Creek, Dwyer Creek, and again, Lower Lacamas Creek. Those are areas that we're seeing particularly high bacteria concentrations. And then I talked a little bit about some potential sources with septic systems, not seeing a clear smoke and gun relationship with the bacteria, and then but we do have several instances where we're seeing livestock directly accessing those creeks. I'm going to wrap this up with temperature. So this map's a little bit different. So and this higher, the larger the dots, that's the higher the percentage of days during the year that the site did not meet our temperature standard. So what we see here is there are a couple of sites, Fifth Plain Creek at mile marker 0.2 and a China Ditch site. Those are, again, our ground sites that we think have some groundwater influence, where we're seeing relatively decent temperatures. However, across much of the rest of the watershed, we're seeing a lot of high temperatures, up to in Big Ditch, which is about halfway down this map, that small tributary coming into Lacamas Creek. That site we had, I believe it was about 93% of days that are not meeting the temperature standard. What might be causing this? One very clear thing that we could improve easily, or relatively easily, or at least more easily than climate change, is shade on the creek. There's several opportunities that we saw very poor to no shade on some of these creeks. Spring Branch Creek, again, this is a groundwater creek, but there is no shade on that creek whatsoever. Similarly, you can see Big Ditch Creek on the right side of the screen with virtually no shade. And then there's several locations that we saw residential properties backing up directly to the creek with no trees bordering that creek. So really improving some of those riparian vegetation could really increase shade in those areas, help us to start bringing those temperatures down. So just a brief summary of our priority areas. In China Ditch, we're seeing very high phosphorus, relatively high nitrogen values. Shanghai Creek is where we're getting some of those high bacteria concentrations. Upper Fifth Plain Creek, we're seeing more temperature exceedances. And in the lower parts of Fifth Plain Creek, higher nitrogen. Big Ditch, that's where we had those very high temperature exceedances. Spring Branch Creek, we're seeing a lot of phosphorus and nitrogen. In Lower Lacamas Creek, we're seeing high nitrogen bacteria. And then in Dwyer Creek, there's very high phosphorus, temperature, and bacteria concentrations. And then this is just some of the recommendations that we're putting into the source assessment. So we're just getting a more detailed understanding of the sources of bacteria and nutrients. So I talked about, in terms of septic systems, we can't really say what the data that we have if there's a water pattern. So that could be an opportunity for microbial soil tracking work, more detailed septic work. Working with our non-input specialists in the watershed to address things like livestock access to streams and manure piles. Doing some riparian restoration efforts I pointed out where we don't have good shade cover in the watershed. And then just emphasizing again community outreach and education, especially in a watershed like Lacamas where we have a lot of non-point sources. Things like restoration of trees and vegetation on those properties bordering creeks, installation of livestock exclusionary fencing, and then education about limiting non-point sources of pollution, especially phosphorus in those more areas with open lawns and pasture where we're seeing those very high concentrations. And now I'm going to pass it over to Nate, who's going to talk to us about the Advanced Restoration Plan.
Yeah.
Okay.
It tends to be tend to speak loudly, so you know if you can't hear me or it's too loud to turn microphones down on me in the past. Good morning. My name is Nate Woodard. I'm the TMDL and Water Quality Improvement Lead to the Vancouver Field Office. It's my first presentation since, gosh, I think it's 2017 is the last one I did. It was a much smaller crowd. Not the best public speaker potentially, but I'm going to try to do my best today. So I'll be giving a short presentation on the Advanced Restoration Plan for Lacamas Creek. Slide, please. The Advanced Restoration Plans focus on the overall watershed. Lacamas Creek watershed is 67 square miles with 3 jurisdictions, which I think we're hopefully familiar with: Clark County, City of Camas, City of Vancouver. Lacamas Creek is impaired for dissolved oxygen, bacteria, temperature, and pH. There's a question about land use. Here's some highlights about land use. The upper part of the watershed is forested. We've got ag, commercial, residential, industrial. And this rural watershed is now transitioning towards urban, at least in the lower part of the watershed. All right, so the Advanced Restoration Plan, formerly known as an Alternative Restoration Plan. It's the ARP focuses on rapidly implementing corrective watershed actions for non-point pollutions. ARPs focus on local partnership implementation in the watershed. ARPs highlight non-point financial resource needs. ARPs are important tools that we can use to clean up watersheds. All right, so there are Advanced Restoration Plans achieve 8 key elements: identification of pollutant sources, analysis of needed pollution reductions, implementation actions needed to reduce pollution, funding opportunities and needs, stakeholder collaboration and activation, estimation of when water quality standards will be achieved, effectiveness monitoring plan, and commitment to reevaluate and make sure implementation is on track. We have 3 ARP goals. I'm kind of highlighted here, perhaps more, but we want to meet water quality standards, strengthen watershed funding, and I think most importantly, strengthen partnerships. Just want to kind of quickly touch on potential pollutant sources. There are potential permitted point source pollution in the watershed. I guess stormwater would be one obvious one. There are a variety of non-point pollutants in the watershed and other contributing factors. Notable non-point sources of pollution. Of course, we got septic, ag, stormwater, riparian vegetation, and unfortunately, we're seeing more and more climate change impacts. Our current forecasted timeline is to have this source assessment completed by 2023. Dale and I am currently working on reviewing that for you. Get that to you soon. January of 2025, we'll have completed the Advanced Restoration Plan. In April of 2025, the Advanced Restoration Plan will be available to help guide stakeholders on implementation strategy. But I would encourage you to please not wait until 2025 to do implementation. I think we have a lot of data currently available, both with today's presentation from the source assessment and from the presentation with Clark County. So let's get out there and start making things happen now, not just wait for a report to come out. Any questions?
I'm going to propose that maybe so we avoid running around. We'll go up here and ask questions. Thank you so much. Give them a round of applause.
My name's Vicki Wesley. I'm with the Lacamas Watershed Council. I have a couple. My first question is, in your permits, in the administration of them, do you have specific clauses that control the uses on the land and what kind of cleanup procedures are necessary? Should there be some kind of hazmat or overflow of some of these nutrients we're seeing? Warren, do you want to also do it?
Yeah, I prefer one of my senior staff folks is I'm relatively new to kind of permitting. So, thanks.
We don't do the permitting in our unit. There are limited point source permits in the watershed right now, and they do put limits to cities that will require the property that permits to continue to be water quality standards. So the main, Yes, there are very
specific to phosphorus use, and there's, I know Oregon has some specific laws, there's Washington.
we address some of some like phosphorus and sediment type of things in our permits, but
Can you all hear this?
we don't have standards for nutrients in the state. Yeah, that's
And I would just add that we don't, is anyone here from Washington State Department of Agriculture? So most of the large-scale combined animal feeding operations are under the jurisdiction of Washington State Department of Agriculture, which requires, there are, I think, 2 facilities as of now to have dairy nutrient management. So that would fall outside of the college's jurisdiction, but would be the primary legal or jurisdictional authority over the larger animal operations of the water.
Okay. That is helpful. I know all about federal, so I know about jurisdictions and changes of laws. And my second question is, with regards to land use changes, does DOE have any control or implementation ability? A lot of, especially in the China Creek area, we've gone from agriculture or dairies to beautiful wine tasting areas, quite tasty. But they're using a lot of fertilizers. Is there any rules, controls on land use changes?
Maybe I'll let Rich come up. I would say that that is Clark County's jurisdiction. And we're a clean water division, and so that would be the community development division that is permitting land use change or any development. But unfortunately, I don't think anyone is here today from community development, so that would be in our county. Go ahead, Rich.
Rich, Department of Health, yeah, that's exactly correct. Ecology works on the water quality or solid waste or toxic waste or quality regulations, but land use is really in the purview of county and city governments.
I know, I just see all these over layers. Surely there's got to be some way to, collaborate or mitigate or.
And we do. The only other exception to that is ecology also administers in partnership with local government the shoreline management plan. That's not all my water.
Thank you.
Sure.
And thank you for Rich is our Southwest Regional Office Director of Quality, so very happy to have.
So you've got the ecology team far away.
Yeah, any other questions for ecology focused on water quality in Lacamas?
Hi, I'm Elise Alexander. I'm a volunteer with the Lacamas Watershed Council. I had a question about the temperature data. Is it a floating data point? Because the temperature can vary significantly during the year. Is that taken into account?
Yes.
Yeah, so our temperature data that I presented here was from a series of continuous temperature measurements. They were installed between, I believe, May and October. So it was to capture that summer critical period where we see the highest temperatures. So that those temperatures were taken every 15 minutes, and they were spot checked 2 or 3 times to make sure that that consistent measurement was accurate. And then the parameter I actually showed is it's called the 70 parameter, and it's the average of the daily high temperatures over the 7 days surrounding the date.
So there is some temperature smoothing there. And then we're also focusing on capturing that summer warm temperature. Good question.
Good morning, my name's Robin here with Indian Water Resources. I just had a question about, you mentioned that some groundwater sampling has been done. Were groundwater samples monitored for nutrients such as phosphorus? If so, what the results? If not,
Yes. Another good question. So there was a groundwater study that was completed in 2013, and so it is published. I believe it's called the Lacamas Watershed Surface Groundwater Assessment in 2013. They did sample nutrients, and we saw some variation. Generally, the groundwater nutrient values were lower than the corresponding surface water measurements, but there was measurable, I believe they did the same to the nutrients as they did for the surface water, and there was measurable phosphorus and nitrogen in most of the groundwater samples that were taken in the watershed.
Well, my name is Phil Parsley. I'm actually here with the Friends of Vancouver Lake, and I just have two quick questions. It was mentioned a couple times that the DOE doesn't have any nutrient standards, and so I just would ask this, can somebody speak to that or put some context around why there isn't, or if there's any plans? And I'll ask my second question as well. The 2011 data is now 12 years old, so the question is there any plan for collecting newer data, and is there any assessment of what changes that there might have been over the last 12 years that would affect the accuracy of the 2011 data that's current?
Yeah, I can exactly that. So yes, that 2011 data is very old at this point. We did a couple of things as good with limited budget to see if there are any major changes. In terms of bacteria, in 2011, most of the coliform. In 2021, we compared coliform to E. coli, and that's because the E. coli is now the state water quality standard for bacteria, but we collected those paired coliform data specifically to compare to the 2011 data. And what we saw across the watershed, there was no statistically significant change in our fecal coliform bacteria between 2011 through 2021. The only exception with that was Wire Creek, where we did have a significant increase in those values from 2011 to 2021. That was a little more complicated because we didn't do water scale nutrient sampling in 2021. What we do have is our ambient monitoring program installed a temporary monitoring study at Goodwood Road, which is where we collected data in 2011. And they took monthly nutrient data in I believe it's 2020 through 2022. And that nutrient data is similar to what we were finding in the 2011 data. And then beyond that, we really were relying on the Clark County data that Marlena provided. We're seeing similar ranges in our nutrient values from the 2011 through the Clark County data where we have similar sites. So that's the extent of what we have. And then
the nutrient slides.
Yeah, we have some bonus slides, and there should be one. There you go.
Yeah, the short answer on developing nutrient standards, we are working on it currently. Don't have nutrient standards in place at the moment. Things like dissolved oxygen, pH, which are highly impacted by nutrients. We get add nutrients standards process, but we are working to develop that further.
Maybe just looking at information standards from the state.
drinking water, that's 10 milligrams per liter. So where nutrients can be impact human health or regulation.
Include nutrient data. So we should have information soon-ish. It's 2023, right? Do you have something you'd like to say?
This may be a little bit off the subject, but when you're testing for phosphorus and nitrogen, would that test be able to look for potential PFAS?
We did not look for PFAS in this study. That could be, I don't know if you want to speak to potential future work, but that's not something at the time this data was collected. We were not collecting PFAS data.
Is the test significantly harder to perform for PFAS because it's such a small amount?
It is definitely different test methodologies that you're getting at if you're looking for parameter. I don't have the exact details on it, but the PFAS sampling is much more technically complicated. And to be clear, you can't pull that from the nutrient sample that's here. So, okay, yeah, thank you. Yeah.
I'm going to put that in the parcel. Yeah. It's not directly related.
And second, I understand that phosphorus in fertilizers is banned in Washington State. Is that true?
I think you might be thinking of detergents.
Detergents, soaps. Okay.
Fertilizer powders, there are stringent limitations like the conception.
You can't hear it. This is the way.
Okay. In terms of enforcement of phosphorus, if it is illegal, how would that be a city's job? Would that be a county's job? How would you enforce if you had a ban on those chemicals?
This is a really good question. And I think it's something that we can all talk about as a group, because what is included in manufactured products, that is definitely a policy discussion that happens in Olympia and in Washington, D.C. with the manufacturers directly. And so I would say the best thing we can do is educate our elected officials at the state and national level on how important this is for fertilizers so that they can work with the manufacturers. I do know, though, that there are opportunities to develop and adopt local codes and ordinances around what's allowable, and that we have in our stormwater permits, pollutant source control authority. And so that would be a local decision at the county or city level if you wanted to adopt an ordinance that did not allow fertilizers that contain phosphorus to be used in your jurisdiction. That is something you would have control over. What the manufacturers do, we would definitely need to work with our elected officials at a state and national level.
Yeah. Great answer from Devin. And I may be misremembering it, but I thought at one point this state of Washington limited or severely restricted use of phosphates in detergents, both laundry and dishwashing detergents. You know, and I think I don't know if the conservation district may have information about phosphorus use in fertilizer. That's one of the major components in growing crops, obviously. And so, you know, the problem comes when fertilizers applied in excess of agronomic rates. There's more fertilizer in the ground and the soil the plants can uptake, or it's applied at the wrong time of year. Then that's when you get nutrients right off into our waters.
Thank you.
So this first came to my attention from Steve Wall when we met just a couple of weeks ago, 2011. Washington State did put homeowner knows about it. And you can go to any local hardware store and buy fertilizer. And then they just dump it in the ground and it sees what the plants can use and it's run off. So the Columbia is going to do a follow on our article as a result of your statements. I passed it on to them. So it's education, first and foremost. I can't, you guys are doing great work, but I can't wait until next year. I can't wait until 2026. As a politician, I need to get this word out now. So on the slides that your slides, your plan is where the rubber meets the road. I need to weaponize that. So I need to get that out to educate the community through our conservation district and elsewhere. If you get, before all these, the testing will never stop. But right now, we need your top 3 messages we need to convey to agriculture, to homeowners, from domestic pets to large animals. We need to get the word out. So if you could really help us as elected officials get the word out, because we need voluntary compliance right now, not 10 years from now, but right now. So that the phosphate question is something I'm going to bring up with our local legislative delegation. I'm hoping every city does, and whether or not we can do something locally, we're going to start looking at that. I know Michelle and Sue and Glenn that are here, I'm hoping they'll join me in that, because maybe we can do some local legislating to get a little bit more of a handle on fertilizer use.
I just want to say thank you, and I'm here locally, Vancouver field office. I want to build partnerships with you. I don't know you. Please come say hello at the break. Let's give me a business card and let's build some partnerships towards cleaning up the lake, cleaning up flat street.
Thank you so much. Especially when we have one locally, we're very lucky. And I think they are one of our new non-food source staff in the region will be here. Thank you for traveling down to Valencia. At this time, I think we're actually on schedule, which is fantastic, but let's take a break. We'll take 15 minutes. During that 15 minutes, I would encourage you to the restroom in the back, you get another cup of coffee, go meet each other. There's some microscopes over here. You want to take a look at some cyanobacteria and education outreach information. And we will come back together at, we'll make it easy, 10:15. Thank you. Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
And wanting to start in your tactics. Second warning, grab your coffee, only more time to talk, you have a full hour at lunch. I always dislike having some great, good conversation. And I can tell there's a lot of good connecting there.
Want me to whistle?
Yes, please. That was impressive. Thank you. All right, if you can hear me, clap once. Quite for me. Thank you all. You may have heard me say this, but I really dislike having to cut off great conversation, but I appreciate your patience and hope that conversation carries into lunch. Let's get back onto our agenda. As a reminder, before lunch, we still have Lacamas Watershed Council, a Clark County presentation on fall leaflet, and then we'll hear from the city of Camas on their lake management plan. So without further ado, I'd like to invite the Lacamas Watershed Council up.
Thank you, everyone. Hello, respected audience, esteemed guests. I'm delighted to have the opportunity to address you today. My name is Judy Lawrence, and I'm proud to serve as the founder and board president of the Lacamas Watershed Council. Our journey began in 2020 when a group of dedicated Camas citizens united to address the pressing issue of toxic algae blooms in our beloved Lacamas, Round, and Fallen lakes. Our primary goal is to enhance the water quality in the Lacamas watershed with a special focus on these three iconic lakes. The heart of our mission from the very beginning has been to advocate for and drive improvements in the water quality of the Lacamas watershed, with a special emphasis on the protection of the three lakes. We firmly believe that this mission can be best achieved through positive collaboration with all stakeholders invested in our beautiful ecosystem. The Lacamas Watershed Council is an apolitical, volunteer-based 501c3 nonprofit organization, solely driven by our dedication to the preservation and enhancement of our local environment. We exist to serve, educate, and unite our community in this vital cause. In 2021, we solidified a critical partnership with NOAA's phytoplankton monitoring network, empowering our dedicated volunteers to collect vital data on a weekly basis. This partnership has enabled us to gain invaluable insight into the health of our lakes and the challenges they face. With that, let me introduce you to Roger Hodden and Vicky Westling, who are leading and championing our PMO.
How are we going to do this? Aye. I get to click myself. What's our mission? Monitor lake water quality. You got this. Okay. We monitor all 3 lakes every week. We collect silent bacteria. Here, you have some pictures, all taken from each other. We will take a look at it when we're done. We take a look at the concentration by measuring the little block we have at the end, and we can tell if they're elevated or not. We cooperate with all our regional players. You have a list of them, but they're all cities. And we come in and try to communicate our findings to all our users. We have problems, of course, with Lacamas especially, with their blooms, and sometimes you can't even go to the lake. And we're trying to get that correct.
Sure. We have several activities, Vicky West looking in. And I'm technically the field communicator coordinator. We have 5 water testing teams, and I kind of help oversee them, make sure our data gets put in. And we have the tool guy who keeps all our little equipment all put together and working. So our activities, we've been participating in some of the public events that have been going on, hosting table. We helped do the water cleaning when that happened at the end of September. Our lateral zones, Mid-Lake, and we've been doing Mid-Lake for last summer, and we've been documenting it this summer. We have a guy with a boat who volunteers his time. So a couple of us get to go out on the boat and do deep water testing. The lake in some areas are over 60 feet deep down in the middle. So we've been able to get down a little ways and monitor that. Our 5 stations that we test, I call it East Dock, but it's the one over on the other side. Then we have the Heritage Dock. Then we have Lacamas Shores Boat Launch. And then we have Round Lake and we have Fallen Lake. So we've been tracking all the data for the past 3 years, collecting. And then we coordinate with several of the community cameras, Clark County, Kansas City, Clark County, and we submit our pilot monitoring network. What is not up there is NOAA, National Standard and Atmospheric. They're the ones that actually gave us the guidelines. They gave us the 5 target species that we're to be monitoring. So we uploaded the information every week, every Thursday, and we submit it to NOAA, and we submit to the city on our visit tracker. And Clark County Health Department monitors one of our students. So we try and keep information going. No, it's great. The gal that we work with was also involved with the national EPA system was putting on a similar session, and she was involved, so she wasn't able to come. But that's been very helpful. They've got a whole database that's just tracking fresh water data, so nationwide. And this has become a huge issue. So the fact that we're doing a part nationwide, worldwide, the kudos to all of us for being involved.
We have been partnering with Camas. Steve Ball is in our pocket and we're in his pocket. It's become extremely rich partnership because we've been able to share plans as things are going to go. We're part of Clark County, Clark County Commissioner. clean water commission the last 3 years. That relations has lost and allowed us to work on a huge scale than we have. The Clark County Conservation District, we have had meetings there over how this whole watershed goes together. Many of our water resources, rainwater, Ray's kind of a board member, but she's too busy with all of her stuff. Really, we're going to try to already. Watershed Alliance have lots of meetings, a lot of taking them off versus we're going to get far more about it. It is taking a look at the total community, both nonprofit, Joe Average, Joe that sits on the docks, all of the county organizations reaching out at the state, reaching out nationally. It takes a whole village to make this work. Yes. It's been years since I had to talk to anyone.
Okay, I already jumped ahead. So yes, our team's been doing this for 3 years. Those of our team members have been doing it the whole time. We're always looking for more volunteers. It's quite exciting. It takes about 15 minutes and we do water testing from various locations. And then we come home and we look at the microscope. And then we upload the data to the site. So the whole thing, our apps in your area, then clean up the equipment, wash your hands. So that doesn't take too long. We do periodic training, we just did one at the beginning of this month with our teams, and we have a few other people come in. Go over how to set up our dissolved oxygen monitoring, how to, Mr. Tool Guy tells us how to adjust all the membranes and make sure we have the right kind of distilled water. And then I already identified our sites. Oh, Rob just got the spaghetti machine. This is one of our newest tools. It is dissolved oxygen, pH monitor, and TDS, total dissolved solids. And we used to have the individual little tool for each, and now we only have one big one. And we toss it out. First we have to calibrate it, and then we put it out in water, and it comes all out with all the data, including salts. That's not a big thing that we're reporting, but we are monitoring it now. And so, want to add anything to that?
The whole process of upgrading our equipment has gone on for all the 3 years we've been doing this. If you got any money, please for equipment, because we have some more upgrading to do. You want to finish?
All right. Well, for instance, this one is $400. Just one of these.
And we have 5.
We were able to buy some $300, so we were able to buy 5 of them. We're using some bolts, microscopes.
Yeah. But most of the microscopes we use in our binocular application microscopes with these cameras. Please, as you're milling around eating lunch, we got lots of nice photographs of what we found here in the lake. You monitor pH, dissolved oxygen, water and temperature. We do not only water temperature, but air temperature. Total dissolved solids, conductivity, wind speed, and direction. So we have some kind of environmental data. And they're very impressive. We watch it. And I have to say, we're being part of PMN, the Phytoplankton Monitoring Network. We have a whole different system than Clark County Public Health does. They use the EPA system. PMN system is designed for a bunch of citizens to go out and do this work. Yeah, we have a bunch of science guys and gals out there, engineers, good people that know and are committed to this, so we can understand what's going on. It's why we change.
Just for this part, we were talking about pH and dissolved oxygen. We had a volunteer for Waves to help us pull some data together. 2021 was a ferociously gloomy year. That's when people started recognizing my dog's sick, I'm sick. And so anyway, we had to take 2021 and 2022 and kind of graph it out. So what we did was the three dominant targets were for dissolved oxygen, water temperature, and pH, right, President?
Right.
And so they all vary. What this tells you is that when one goes up and elevates in temperature, you're going to see a difference in what's gloomy. The higher it goes, the more activity you have over there. Now, we're just monitoring 5 of the sign of activity. This is the stuff that we just said. This is the stuff that makes the dogs. So this is when we were working with the city, and they were coming out, or the county, and they were coming out and posting the signs of the dog. Don't go in the water. Don't let your dog swim. The big thing is getting people to read the signs. But, you know, that's part of it. Do you want to talk about this at all? Or
No,
okay. Okay, thank you.
What we take is a 25 milliliter dip stand. And that's what we call a protocol stand. That's what we report on. We also take a 12 stand with a plankton net, 80 micron plankton net. And this is to find what's coming. Because we can do a trawl and pull this step in. I think Terry was talking about that one this morning. You actually have a bloom that's right outside. So during lunch or whatever, go take a look at these critters. You can actually see all these guys crawling around every week. pH. I was going to put together a huge pH graph, and nobody can decipher from it, you can understand it. So I just kind of did, okay, in year 1, we had a pH that went from 7.7 to 9.7.
What's normal pH for our lake?
8.5. I was about ready to ask what the difference between 7.5 and 8.5 is. That's an embarrassing question, because most people don't really know. Okay. Anybody tell me? What's the difference between 7.5 and 8.5? Well, rhythmic scale. Yes. Yes, right. So it's a heck of a lot more basic at 9.7. Heck of a lot more basic. The average that year was 9. Year 2 it came down, but it had an average of 8.6. We came 7.6 to 9.7. Year 3, 7.1 to 9.0. Average about 8.4. It came down. We also saw blooms in 2021, 2022, and let's see what's in 2023. We found a few if you really want to look for. What do we all watching? What are you doing? On dissolved oxygen. Let me tell you something about taking data first. Taking data is difficult work. Anybody who's ever gone out in the water and tried to take a sample, you got a tool. Is that tool calibrated? Is it working right? Did somebody drop yesterday and get you the wrong data? And all the time looking at our data to make sure that the data is right. What can we throw out so that we keep? It is a very human process. So, yeah, or what do I mean by littoral? Let me tell you what's the littoral. Not on the surface, but what's the littoral? Our three sites on Lacamas plus Brown and it's all the littoral areas. 3.4 to 11.5. That's a big difference. This is all rocks. Year 2, 3.3 to 12.8. 6.9 to 10.1. It's milligrams per liter. And basically, in the state about the city for the information we found. Dissolved oxygen.
Okay, go to the next.
I gotta go to the next one. All right, water temperature. You know what the water temperature was out there. It was hot. God. But it's coming in hot. Because when we take a look at the temperatures of Lacamas Creek coming in, that water is warm. So our water is warm and it's heated up and it causes all these problems that we see with our blooms. I threw this slide in and I'll just have a short thing to say about it. I'm no professor. I have grants. And our grants were always 3, maybe a 5-year grant. This is really one. And so you wanted data collected, it's a report written, go on to the next. This is what that purpose. This cycle is 10 years long? Is it 20 years long? I don't know. We've been looking at seals, I'll look at it, what, 91, 92? Yeah. We've been looking at this for a while, back to 85 and looked at it. Everybody does something different. The lack of water mechanical resilience with a long range and we'll pull this data for as long as it takes. I'll be dead before they're done. So this is, I mean, I don't know.
Couple minutes, or sorry, is that the last word?
No. Midland test. No.
Yeah, go on.
Midland. We did in 2022 the first play pilots. 2023 we got some very interesting data. Number 1, the lake did not stratify. It did not stratify actually until September, where we got 10 degrees of difference. That's 10 degrees centigrade. It did not stratify, the dissolved oxygen stayed high, down low, stayed high at 60 feet. There was no internal loading last year. What's internal loading? All right, listen up, all politicians. Look, dissolved internal loading is really important. It is the bacteria in the bottom of the lake pumping out phosphorus. They do it when the dissolved oxygen gets 1, 0. They change the faculty of anaerobic bacteria. This is the bottom of the list. Most of the stuff that goes down the phosphate tables down in the bottom. It is sequestered there. It's sequestered there by the bacteria that are on. When the dissolved oxygen drops, it pumps it back. It didn't do it last year. So we have to be very careful of how we manage all of our late processes so that we take a look at internal loading, no internal loading. Where is the phosphate coming from? Steve Wall was right. He and I have had a few disagreements, but he was right, because what he said was, we have to stop phosphate at its source. We have to stop it at its source. That means one short story. The chemicals are fertilizing the parts, whatever. On the other side, it's not seeing parts chemical. There's all running around with this little machine fertilizing it, and the nose guy was actually taking the groundlets. And I went over and looked at his bag, and I expected to see all this phosphate. But it wasn't. It said 20, 0, 18. And I practically jumped and skipped all the way down to the lake and take our team. That's what needs to go on all over. You want me to quit, don't you?
No. Minutes is up Q&A. That's fine.
We did phosphate testing all over the lake. Terry and I did it, and so bad because I was carrying it white. And what we found was that all around the lake, we did 13 samples from up at the Gibbons Bridge, the bridge of Lacamas Street, all the way down on both sides of the lake. It wasn't it was no grass. But it doesn't ask me what Lacamas shows what is all said. I'll tell you what, it was so much phosphate coming in, we didn't know which way to turn. We're trying to get down to 25 micrograms per liter. The lake right now is running at 600 to 800 micrograms per liter. We've got to get the phosphate out of the water. And that's the bottom line. He's right. Stop it, folks.
Thank you. I'm so grateful that the minutes at Proctor is on our Clean Water Commission. He was the person behind the idea of this event. It was in February, way before I came on board. So to them. So this is almost a year in the making. So thank you to Roger. We can give him a round of applause for it. Are there any questions for the Lacamas watershed?
Yes. Just a clarification question. When you said there was no supplementation last year, 2023?
In 2023, excuse me. In 2023, we did not see any stratification until a 3-degree stratification in August. And when we did it in September, there was a 10-degree stratification. Because we don't have a way of the tool, we could only do the bottom temperature and the top temperature. We didn't have $6,000. We didn't have the right tool to take a profile.
Thank you. I have a question for them. So what do you see is next for the watershed council?
That's my last slide.
Oh, yeah.
But one of the things, I'm a lot, and one of the things that, that they've asked us to do is a quiet plant survey. And I'd love to do one. And actually take them and identify them and actually press them and have them so that people can use it. And then we got a protocol that we put together. Terry and I kind of did a watershed pilot. We need materials so we can do it properly. We need to do different kind of scopes and a bunch of other junk. But we want to start a watershed process that takes a look at probably 6 of the creeks and does a long-term study. The county can only do it every so often. We want to do it on a monthly basis during the growing season to get a good look at what's happening in the watershed. We want to continue our monitoring efforts right along every week. And we do a bit like every month. And any of this data that we have, and we've got tons, we'll be more than happy to share with any of you that need it. And we'll talk about it.
Thank you so much. Any other questions for the watershed council? If not, I would encourage you at lunch. They are doing demonstrations on the microscope, or if you want to take a walk down to the lake. And I just want to thank you, Vicki and Roger, and others that are here that I have not met yet from the watershed council. I do think that you are a great mechanism for us to reach the public, and I know that you know your neighbors, and getting this message to the neighbors and all the residents. And this is awesome. Thank you. A round of applause for the watershed council. Okay, up next we have this is where we have a small change to the agenda because we're going from the watershed to the lake level. So I want to invite Bob Hutton up to talk about our county's work in Fallen Peak Lake that has done really to support the Hammond Lake Management Planning efforts. So at this time, I'd like to bring Bob up. Figure out that. Reminder to the speaker, this is our online microphone, so make sure you're keeping this close to you also. That's probably fine.
Well, just me. Well, first of all, I'm going to introduce myself. I'm Bob Hutton. I've been with Clark County for, well, actually, it's going to be a third of a century next week. So, not that I'm counting, but it's been a while. And kind of have a reputation in our department. They call it the Bob factor. Usually, if I'm around technology, things don't always work out well. For example, this morning, I went over to get some updates on how to use this, and they had it over the table there. As I approached, suddenly it stopped working. That's good. Okay, so I walked away and it started working. So keep your fingers crossed, and let's see how this works. All right. So as I mentioned, I am the lead, or was the lead, on the Fallen Leaf Lake monitoring project. And the monitoring, this forward. Oops, there we go. Okay. During 2020, Clark County evaluated the status of Fallen Leaf Lake under an interval program with the city of Camas. The county staff performed the monitoring of the lake as well as the 3 tributaries coming into the lake, and then we developed a baseline monitoring plan based on that that limited monitoring. I mentioned it was limited. On this, there were about 9 field days on the lake and 3 in the tributaries. So the major tasks that we performed were threefold. The first one's mapping, and this involved taking measurements and mapping the depths around the lake, creating a bathymetric map. Additionally to that, we did a qualitative survey of the aquatic vegetation distribution and created a map for that. Another major task is monitoring the tributaries for water quality as well as flow. And then, in addition to that, another major effort was mid-lake monitoring for water quality. And then finally, the last task is developing a summary report where we documented what we observed as far as beneficial uses, context, in their historical context. And then finally, summarizing the stats of the lake. So on this slide here, you'll see on the left side, the yellow polygon is the Palm Leaf Lake watershed, which is about 350 acres. And on the right slide, you'll see the location relative to Round Lake to the east and Lacamas Lake to the northeast. And you can see there are actually 4 tributaries, small tributaries that come into Palm Leaf Lake, and then the outlet is on the east side. So as far as just general physical dimensions of Palm Leaf Lake, its basin, the lake surface area is 21 acres. The maximum depth is 28 feet, and that's in the north central portion of the basin. And the lake volume is 264 acre-feet. Now, in theory, if you were to empty Palm Leaf Lake completely, it would take approximately 200 to 250 days to refill that basin, and that's called a residence time. As far as the proportion of the lake at various depths, the diagram on the lower right shows that about 60% of the lake is less than 10 feet deep. Another third is 10 to 20 feet deep, and only about 8 feet are deeper than 20 feet. Palm Leaf Lake area contains diverse habitats and wildlife. It has an intact shoreline and aquatic habitats that support various plants and wildlife. The upland areas support forests. Shoreline is surrounded by wetlands, and the shallow areas have root plants and submerged logs and rocks. And of course, the deep open water area has a few floating plants and, of course, algae. The map on the right shows the groups of the habitats around the perimeter of the lake. And on the image there, you can see the yellow areas. Those are primarily mostly yellow pond lilies. Between the open dark blue area, which is the open water area, and the shoreline is the littoral zone. And in there's also large areas of wetlands. And dispersed around the lake, there are those brown dots. Those are symbols for submerged logs or submerged bedrock outcrops. Finally, the green numbers on that map represent where we sample aquatic macrophytes or plants to come up with a qualitative assessment of what the range of types of plants that we found. Palm Leaf Lake supports multiple beneficial uses for humans, as well as is also impacted by humans from its watershed. Some of the beneficial uses for humans are swimming, boating, shoreline, hiking, and picnics, and just aesthetics. Historically, the lake, there's some hints that there were previous uses of the lake in that there's a concrete spillway on the outlet of the lake, and you see that in the lower left corner there. So the lake's water level seemed to be historically had been manipulated. We're not sure, we never could find what the actual uses of that were. It could be anything from just water storage to logging, but that structure still exists there. So on the right side of the slide, you'll see that there are 4 tributaries that come into Palm Leaf Lake, and we named them just temporarily based on their relative position: northwest, subwatershed, west, southwest, south, as well as the direct runoff into Fall Leaf Lake. So our water quality monitoring occurred, in this case, on the tributaries. There were 4 monitoring stations. Those colored dots around the perimeter of the lake were the 3 tributary monitoring stations right near the confluence with the lake. And there's also another monitoring station that was at the outlet of the lake right before it joins into Lacamas Lake. What we did find was that most of the water quality in the tributaries was pretty good. There were some instances where bacteria was periodically high, specifically in the northwest tributary. In addition to that, one of the things that we noticed is that there was some visual evidence of high energy flows, high flows on a couple of tributaries. In this case, the picture on the lower left is the northwest tributary. And you can see that there's tree roots exposed there, bank erosion. So for the water to get up that high, it's probably pretty flashy and with a lot of energy coming down. So an example of lake monitoring that we performed was the classic second gist readings. And what these are, for those people that aren't familiar with it, basically you're lowering a 9-inch disc with a sort of a checkerboard pattern on it down through the water column until it disappears. And then you pull it back up, and at the point where you can just see it, that's your second gist reading. And the nice part about second gist reading is a very simple tool. It gives you an estimate temporally of summer algal density. If the reading is shallow, that means there's likely an algal bloom a bloom event going on. If it's deep and clear water, much chance that there's high density algae there. So on the right photo, you'll see this is a plot of our 9 second gist readings during the summer and fall of 2020. And you can see the first 3 or 4 lines there were during summer 2020. And they tended to be shallower, so there was less clarity in the lake. And then during the fall, early fall to mid-fall, the clarity increased. So likely there was less algal blooms occurring in those periods. So some other monitoring that we performed involved using a multi-probe sensor that was lowered down through the depth from the surface of the lake down to the bottom. And it recorded a range of water quality parameters from temperature, pH to DO, conductivity. And what we found is no surprise, the lake does stratify during the summer to 3 layers, the classic stratification of the lake. In the upper layer, it was warmer, and it was less, it started more oxygen and fairly low bacteria levels. In the lower layers, it was cooler and much less oxygen. As I mentioned, alluded to before, there were signs of sediment. One of the things that we saw in the actual lake where that northwest tributary enters Fall Leaf Lake, there's a delta that's been apparently growing over time, but this is a picture of it in the lower left. And we can tell there's some recent activity there because there's no bottom dwelling algae under the near surface water. So it's probably been eroded, just active material coming in. So the trophic state index is a way to show the overall amount of lake enrichment. Trophic state index summarizes this relative productivity for algae as well. If the TSI values are higher, there's typically more nutrients, more algae, and less clarity. And vice versa, if it's lower, there's less nutrients, less algae, and greater clarity. So for Fall Leaf Lake, almost said Vancouver Lake, sorry. For Fall Leaf Lake, you can see overall the enrichment state for it falls in the eutrophic category. And there's 3 measures that we use for that to give you a little bit different perspective on that impact. One is uses chlorophyll, another uses total phosphorus, and the third uses the second gist. But overall, Fall Lake Lake falls in the eutrophic category. So, in summary, lake area supports multiple water-related deficits. The lake water quality reflects cumulative impact of many interacting factors, both natural and human-induced. The status is generally enriched, eutrophic. However, the lake's small watershed and watershed size allow for targeted management efforts to protect its valued beneficial uses. And one last thing I'll put in here is a little bit of a plug. This is a kiosk that we put in probably 15 to 20 years ago now, near Mound Lake, between the bathroom and the lake. And for people that haven't seen it, has basically, we've been told this can be somewhat of a miniature linology course. He studied those panels and got some of the information out of it. But it's been useful, and that was one of the projects that we did under the previous Lacamas grant. Anyway, that's most of it. I'll leave you with one final quote that I like. It's from, I can't remember who the speaker is, but it's from someone from North American Lake Management Society. And what the gist of it is that it's easy to get something or like a pollutant into a lake, but it's much harder to get it out. So something to keep in mind. And Fall Lake Lake is really only 1,000 feet that way. It's kind of a hidden gem. A lot of people don't even know about it. It used to be called Fall Lake, or it used to be called Dead Lake. Everybody was able to find out why that was, but it's quite a real unique feature, especially with given the development that's surrounding in this area here. So it's definitely worthwhile protecting. That's it.
Thank you, Bob. We think they're really quick. Any questions for Bob? We will take a few questions and then we want to get to his presentation.
Well, mine's just real quick again for water testing, because I see there are some tributaries that come from this into pond. Does it do a culvert under the road system, or?
Tributaries from?
Well, look like on the drainage is coming from Lacamas Lake as a tributary into Fall Lake.
No, not from Lacamas Lake. That is the outlet. So there's 4 minor and sometimes seasonal tributaries coming from here. There's 4 tributaries that come into Fall Lake. Some of them are seasonal. In fact, probably half of them are seasonal. Northway, the northwest tributary is the one that has the most consistent flow. And the outfall and the flow leaving Fall Lake is maybe what you're referring to. That's the one that comes in right over here.
Thank you. That's what I see.
Yes, that's the outfall.
I have a question. Besides the outfall from Fall Lake into Lacamas, are there any other hydrologic connectivity with the lake, or is Lacamas Lake mixed in? Maybe Kansas is going to cover this.
Is there any
Mixing between the.
As far as I know, no, because Fall Lake is a couple feet higher than Lacamas Lake, so it's definitely falling down. And there are some wetland areas between, which probably helps to filter the water quality as well. Keep in mind that all Lake's water quality is substantially better than Lacamas Lake's water quality. But it's definitely a gem.
And we're protecting, maybe not even the source of pollution, but we're protecting so it doesn't become one. Thank you, Bob, for his three decades of service to Clark County. Give him a round of applause. All right, up next we have one of our main events. I think every presentation is important, but we do have Camus here to talk about their lake management plans, along with Chica from Geosyntec. So thank you again to Steve Wall, Public Works Director at Camus.
Thank you, Devin. And the first thing I'll say is thanks to Devin and for Camus staff. I can tell you that seeing the behind the scenes of this event took a lot of effort and time on county staff's part. So I will probably recognize them in our team. I want to make sure everybody realizes that. So
Thank you. For those of you, again, I'm Steve Wall, I'm the Public Works Director for the City of Camas. I am not going to pretend to be an expert. I've heard my name mentioned a couple of times this morning, you know, on the mic, I kind of forget, like, did I say that? Is it right? Is it wrong? What's going on? But what I've learned is that over the last 4 years, I am still not an expert. And I still have a long way to go. In fact, even today, in the presentations that I've heard and seen most of before, I'm still picking up things and I'm jotting down notes. And so, again, right, the collective group here and the knowledge in the room is awesome. And I think that's what we've got to just continue moving forward with. So, because I'm not the expert, or we don't have the expert on staff either, right? Council, as we got into this, was gracious enough to authorize some funding for us to hire a consultant. And so I've got a couple of those folks with me from the Geosyntech team up here. Along with Geosyntech, we had McKay Esposito and JLA as well in public outreach, which has been a big piece of this puzzle for the city. So one thing before I move to the next slide here and get started, I do want to mention, you see the word lakes, right? So this is something we keyed in on early on. We had, in fact, a lot of our early documents, even internally, we have, you know, lake management plan. We're talking about the lake. Want to be clear that we really focused on all 3 lakes. That was our goal, right? We didn't want to just focus on Lacamas and forget about Mound or Bald Lake Lake. And so that was the intent overall. And it even took us a little bit, but as we got moving, we changed everything to lakes, right? We wanted to really promote that and make sure that everybody understood it wasn't just Lacamas, even though that obviously gets a lot of the attention, but it was also Fallen Leaf and Round Lake as well. So something to understand there. So I'm going to talk just about the background a little bit and then hand it over to Jacob and Ariel. So I'm going to actually start, you know, in 2019, there was a couple of things going on. So one, we had water quality and citizen concerns, and there's a couple of people in the room that I like to mention and give credit to, whether they want it or not. But Judith Lawrence, where'd she go? She played a very big role in this. I don't know how many people actually know that. The other one was, at the time, council member, and between the two of them, I will tell you, there was a big push here behind the scenes to make the awareness, at least at the city level. I'm sure there was awareness in other levels as well, but at the city level, those two individuals really helped push this forward. And so just a little bit of recognition there, again, whether she wants it or not. But then Yuta got her group together and they all continue to push. And that's good, right? That's what we all need to keep the champions behind us to be pushing these processes along and promoting these efforts. The other thing, Bob was talking about Fallen Leaf Lake. In, you know, the 2019 timeframes, we had our first node bloom in Fallen Leaf, and at least I think it was 2019. And so right around that same time frame when we were getting started on kind of the bigger discussions around Lacamas, we looked at Fallen Leaf and said, hey, it is a gem. Let's protect it while we can. Let's not let it get worse if we can help it. And what we did at the city level, at that point in time, you know, we didn't have a lot of funding available, but the thing we did have was great partners, and we chatted with the county right away and said, hey, what are some things that we can do here? And the county staff helped us out. And that got Bob Ford moving on Fallen Leaf Lake, which was actually, you know, a great lead into what became our lakes management plan, which we actually didn't, at the time, didn't really know that's where we were headed. But that push got us into November of 2020. The mayor talked about, you know, needing to take action, and that's what we did. So the council passed resolution 20-016. Basically, that was just a push for staff and the city to move forward on something. We didn't know what yet, but it was, here's some funding, talk to the public, make sure that we're on the right track. get input, and then let's figure out what we need to do. And so once again, with the background, at that time, not having developed any living projects at all, I was thinking, what do I do? And I called county staff. I've known Jeff for a few years. I called Jeff. I'm like, hey, Jeff, help me out here. What are we doing? How do we even get a team on board to help? And so we drafted an RFQ, request for qualifications. That's when we got the consultant team on board with Juice and Tech. And we moved on from there. So phase one, we looked at background, right? We wanted to go back and make sure we had all the data that had been collected in the past. That's going back a long ways. I think we continue to find more data as we went along the process. But that was a big piece of the phase one, was what data is out there. There's been a lot of that talked about today. The other piece of it was, again, go out and talk to the public, right? Make sure that we're not missing something. And it was pretty obvious, right? We see the signs go up, we see people talk about recreation, not being able to get out on the lake when they want to. Intuitively, right, we knew what was happening and what the public was likely to say, but we wanted to make sure we weren't missing anything. And so we did include public outreach as part of that phase one. Just, hey, community, tell us what you think. And we heard exactly what you think we heard here. And then that got us into phase two, which we actually called lake management plan. So again, as we moved into phase one in 2021, we didn't really know what the end outcome was going to be. As we learned a little bit more, we developed a lake management plan process from there. And then as we move into 2023, we'll have, we're starting the implementation phase. So the purpose of the plan, should be no surprises here. They're all important. And I've heard a lot of these mentioned today, actually, between Councilor Medvigi and Mayor Hogan and Devin talked about shared goals and understandings for today. When you look at this list, it's very similar to what Devin shared earlier. We want collected data and scientific evidence. That was something that our council wanted to key in on, right? We have a lot of people in the community, and I'll talk about it a little bit more, but they want to fix right now. A few comments. I looked at Roger. We had some good discussions about how slow government moves. I've heard that a couple times today. There is some truth to that, as much as I need to admit. Public outreach I heard talk about, right? We wanted to make sure that as a whole that we're moving in the right direction here, right? That for some reason, the city wasn't moving in a path that broader community wanted. Partner agencies, that's why we're here. We talk more about that as well. We also short-term and long-term strategies. So I think Councilor Medvigi talked about that, right? The short-term is key, I think, for the Camas community, right? And that's what we've been hearing, is we want a solution now. Take action. We keep hearing that. How come we haven't done anything yet? Obviously, that all those come into play. And then, the recommended strategies and collaborative opportunities. So that is the purpose of the plan, right? It wasn't to operate in a box with just the city. We wanted to make sure that we had collaboration from all our partners, and we got all of that information from everybody that we could gather and get as much of that into the plan as we could. So part of that, there was a couple of folks actually that helped us with the kind of push us all day in getting the original grant funding. We ended up getting a couple of different grants. One from Ecology for the Lake Cyanobacteria Management Plan. Elizabeth is not in the room, but for those of you that know Elizabeth Seabacher, she's been great to work with. She has a small pool of funding relative to the rest of the funding that the state ecology has, but she is able to administer the grants for Lake Cyanobacteria Management Plans. We were successful in that. It was about a $50,000 grant, but as part of that, we said that we wanted to go through this process. There's a template that Ecology has developed for lake management plans, lake cyanobacteria management plans. Cyanobacteria. And that's what we're following, is that template that Ecology has put together on these. So at the end of this, we went through a process, and there's a community city process that we also need to go through at the end of this. We submit plans to ecology and talk about where we're at on that as well. But we have not submitted the full draft yet to ecology. We're getting comments in, and we'll talk about that in the next minutes. The last couple slides about is, again, what one, the first piece here is just the public outreach. I talk a lot about that. This is just a list of the events that we did. It was not like understanding what the community wanted. I think on the flip side, most everybody we recognize this, that there's also a lot of education that has to occur. And so that's the big piece of this too was let's get feedback from folks, but on the other side is let's educate people as well, right? Take the opportunity in these open house events and some of the one-on-one meetings that we did to let them know why this is important, what we're trying to accomplish, some of the science behind it. Again, it's not easy to understand. I'm living proof of that, right? I mean, it takes a little bit to really understand what's happening in the lakes and the impacts and how that relates to what you're doing as a property owner. And so those are important opportunities to take during our public outreach events. And it is worth mentioning the last bullet point here. So large property owners and small business meetings. We did take the opportunity, and we need to follow back up with them now that we have a little bit more data. But yeah, we talked with folks like the golf course, Kansas Meadows, right? We met with them and sat down early on. We talked with representatives of the Johnston family, so the whole dairy on the north side of the lake, right? We talked with some of the smaller business owners, including the kayak rental folks right here, and see a lot of stuff on a day-to-day basis during the summer. So that's been part of our process too, is to reach out to those folks and again help educate them, but also get their feedback on what's important to them. Right? Obviously, they have a business or they have a property, they have things that they want to do that are different, probably in goals and nature than what the city or the community as a whole is trying to accomplish. And so making sure that we're meeting with them and trying to help and educate as we can, as much as it's important. We are having a little cutout on my occasionally, by the way. The last one is just a thank you. So I think everybody's in the room here, but we did not, again, want to do this plan in a vacuum. So over the last 2 or 3 years, we've had a lot of meetings and a lot of conversations with folks. Everybody's been mentioned here, but on the government agency side, for the most part, county, local public works, public health, has been included along the way. Multiple departments of ecology, fish and wildlife, Department of Ag, and Park Conservation District, they've all been there throughout. Right? We've had these stakeholder meetings and we try to get input and make sure that we understand the relationship between what the city's trying to accomplish and the government agencies is kind of in a twofold, right? One is what they're also trying to accomplish, but when we look at it from the city and like how a lot of these folks are also the regulatory side, right? I mean, even the county to a certain extent for the city is there's some regulatory components in there. Ecology, obviously, as we think about a shoreline and the permitting efforts that we need, right? We want to make sure that we're keeping both sides of that equation in mind. And obviously, all of us are trying to accomplish something here together, but there's processes that we need to follow, and we want to make sure that we're not running scientists. And then our nonprofits talked about it, well, a couple of them, Watershed Alliance and Lacamas Watershed Council have been there a long way as well. We've been doing kind of separate meetings with folks, sometimes one-on-one, sometimes group meetings, but we're trying to, again, get input from everybody along the way as much as we can. And then our Kansas Parks Commission as well has been important. We're using that as a stakeholder. Typically, before we head to our council, we want to make sure that we're getting a little bit of input from that level as well. So I just want to say thank you to everybody that has been a part of the process. It's been vital for us to get your input. And with that, I'm going to hand it off to Jacob and Errol to talk a little bit about some of the Stanford activities and technical data. skip one more. Oh. Oh, yeah. I can talk about this one too. My slides were problem. So, what we heard, I already talked about this actually, right? So, but it is worth touching on really quick. So, recreation has been key. Councilor Bennett, you talked about that in his opening remarks. That was obvious. We knew what we were going to do there. But, you know, children and pets, habitat, general water quality, you know, environmental factors, that was probably secondary when you think about it. The recreation was by far away the comment that we heard most from community members. Community. It's probably dead. Just speak up. I can project as well. So yes, the secondary was probably the habitat, which I don't want to say that that's less important, but it was, you know, it wasn't mentioned nearly as much as what the recreational side was. So, and then, you know, backed by science, and I think this is important. So the consideration of balancing all the wants and needs. That's big, right? I talked about the business owners and the property owners, right? Everybody has just different desires and what they want to see accomplished, right, through this plan or through the city's efforts. One of testing, is it on? Wow. Oh, there it goes. Okay. You know, the other thing, really quick, is that I think, yeah, okay. So I think, you know, I mentioned that everybody wants to see action right now. That's something that we recognize, right? And we don't move fast. There's no doubt about that. But I think was said earlier, right? It does not mean that we can't start taking action now. There are things that we can do. There are things that we know now that we didn't know 2 or 3 years ago. And there are groups that are working on that, right? There, the city and the county and everybody that I mentioned on the previous slide, there are lots of things happening. And so from a community standpoint, you know, as much as we can get that message out there that when the question is asked, why aren't you doing anything? Over the last 3 or 4 years and last couple of decades, we can say we have been doing things, right? It's just that we need to keep pushing and keep moving things forward. So that's that last point about just balancing all those wants and needs, right? There's a want to get it done now, but there's also some time and scientific research that needs to be done so we're confident in what we're going to do, right? Or as confident as we can be is going to be successful.
All right. So one of the reasons that it has taken a while to get to the point we're at is we wanted to make sure we had data that was representative of the lakes in their current state, so more recent data than what had been collected in the early 2000s by Clark County and also in the 80s by some of the other scientific studies. So our main goals with this sampling were, first, we wanted to confirm, you know, phosphorus is the limiting nutrient in the lakes, which it is, and it is in most lakes that have algal blooms. And also to determine the major pathways that phosphorus is getting into the lakes. So we accomplished that by sampling most of the major inflows into the lakes. We also wanted to examine the spatial variability of water quality in the lakes, both horizontally and vertically. So we looked at a variety of different locations in the lakes, as well as depths from the surface all the way to the bottom, which you heard earlier. These lakes are quite deep. Lacamas is up to 65 feet deep, and Round is up to 60 feet deep. Fallen Leaf is 35, so especially Round and Fallen for their size are very deep lakes. And then finally to examine the temporal variability of the water quality parameters as well. So ideally, we would have a multi-year data set, but given that we want action in the lakes as soon as possible, we limited that to a year, so we sampled every month for a year. And this
map illustrates the different locations that we sampled. So we had 5 creek locations. And just to tie this in a little bit with the county and ecology, we're talking about their sampling points are all upstream of these. So we share Lacamas Creek at Goodwood Road with both the county and ecology. And then ecology did some sampling in Dwyer Creek as well. But we also sampled Curry Creek and Unnamed Creek, which drains the Fort Dairy property, which are direct tributaries into Lacamas Lake, as well as Lacamas Creek downstream of the lakes. And then sampled, so 5 creek locations, 8 lake locations, with 5 in Lacamas, 2 in Round, and 1 in Fallen Leaf. 2 stormwater locations, 11 sediment locations. We performed a vegetation survey in both Lacamas Lake and Round Lake, and had 2 thermistor chains at LL1, which is the deepest point of Lacamas Lake, and RL1, which is the deepest point of Round Lake. And those are strings that have temperature monitors stretching from the bottom of the lake to the surface, collecting temperature data every 15 minutes. So we can see a bit more detail on the stratification of the lakes. We also had a wonderful gauge at Lacamas Creek at Goodwood Road, which allowed us to measure discharge values from the creek to see how much water was getting in the lakes at different times of the year. So we generated a lot of data from this study. I'm going to focus on phosphorus just because that's the major focus of the lakes at the moment. So on the left is the phosphorus hit in Lacamas Creek at Goodwood Road, and this is going from June of 2022 to May 2023. This is our sampling period. And the phosphorus in Lacamas Creek, we've got about the same order of magnitude as the ecology for the same study period, which is good, you know, our data checks out. The phosphorus in that creek is not particularly high. It is somewhat elevated. We typically, when we're looking at lakes, we want the phosphorus to be controlled, to not have the potential for algal blooms. You're looking at 0.02 to 0.03 milligrams per liter of phosphorus. And so most of the year, Lacamas Creek is slightly above that level. So we are getting excess phosphorus from that creek. On the right, you've got the smaller creeks, so Curry, Dwyer, and then the Unnamed Creek. Curry Creek was generally below 0.02 to 0.03 for most of the year, so that wasn't much of a concern. Dwyer Creek is a little bit higher, particularly in early summer, and then the Unnamed Creek did have some higher spikes of phosphorus. However, those creeks are much smaller, which we'll get to in a bit, so that the higher phosphorus concentrations in those creeks don't necessarily point those out as the problem. And in the lakes, so this is the surface of the lakes, comparing the data that we took over that year to some of the previous studies. And we found the concentrations of phosphorus at the surface were similar to previous years as they were in recent years. So not much change there. You see a little bit lower phosphorus in late summer after the algal blooms have occurred, because that phosphorus has been used up by the organisms to reproduce, and then gets a little bit higher in the winter when you have more runoffs. And that's consistent for both Lacamas, which is on the left, and then Round, which is on the right. And this is near the bottom of the lakes. So we saw quite a bit more phosphorus in the bottom of the lakes, the water quality in the bottom of the lakes than in previous years, which suggests internal loading released from phosphorus during stratification when there's no dissolved oxygen at the bottom. So that was definitely something we wanted to look into more. And that's where the sediment data comes in. So we sampled, as I mentioned, 11 different locations and found actually the most phosphorus in the bottom of Fallen Leaf Lake, followed by Round Lake, and then Lacamas Lake. So the deepest locations have the most phosphorus, which makes sense. It's where a lot of the sediment's going to settle into the deepest point. And we also did phosphorus fractionation on that, so to determine how much of that phosphorus was available to be released and uptaken by bacteria, by phytoplankton. And that number varied between 60 and 80%. So a lot of that phosphorus down there is bioavailable. And you just put it into context, these numbers, sediment numbers are high. They're not astronomically high, but they are high enough to warrant being a potential concern. For inflows, I mentioned we had a water level gauge at Lacamas Creek at Goodwin Road, and then had a few data points for the other creeks, and did some calculations to determine inflows, and found on the left 90% of the inflow to Lacamas Lake is from Lacamas Creek. The Wire Creek is 4%, and then the other inflows are slightly smaller, and 99% of the water flowing out of the lakes is into Lacamas Creek. If you put the flow data and the water quality data together, you can get at the max discharge. So that is what this is. It takes into account both the concentration coming in as well as the amount of flow, which gets you your max. From that, we see Lacamas Creek makes up about 72% of the phosphorus that came into Lacamas Lake during that study period. So mostly, as I mentioned, Lacamas Creek did not have huge amounts of phosphorus, but because 90% of the flow comes in from that creek, you put them together, you still end up with 72% of the phosphorus coming from Lacamas Creek. About 20% of the phosphorus comes from the sediment. That number is, obviously not as big as 72%. It's not something where you can control that 20% and then have the lakes be free of algal blooms, but it is something, it's significant enough that if you ignore it, it could prevent a solution from being successful. The creeks, because they are smaller in flow, even though they're higher in concentration, those smaller creeks still make up a small percentage of the total phosphorus budget. So some major conclusions are just Lacamas Ground and Fallen Leaf Lake are all eutrophic for much of the year. And most of that phosphorus is coming in from Lacamas Creek, although there is a sizable amount coming in from the sediments as well. So I'm going to hand it over to Jacob to talk about the lake management plan.
Thanks, Ariel. I'm Jacob Crawl with Geosyntech, so I was the project manager for this effort. I want to acknowledge my colleague Aaron Moscocher, who kind of ran the whole show on the fieldwork that was presented. I also want to acknowledge Robin here, who was a key driving force with Geosyntech at the beginning and then continuing with Underwater Resources, and Marie Snell is here too with who brought a lot of history and knowledge of ownership to the team. And the Steve mentioned JLA for involvement in all this on the public outreach side. So I'm going to go into our recommended strategies, which is really informed by everything you heard Ariel present on. But first, I want to acknowledge that we reviewed a lot of case studies of other watchman lakes where strategies have been applied. I'm not going to go into all of these, but in the state of Washington, alum is probably has been the most used treatment technology for similar situations. We'll talk a little bit about what that is. You also see phosphop on here, which is another method of basically inactivating phosphorus. So not removing phosphorus, not directly treating the algae, but essentially making phosphorus unavailable for algae growth. We'll talk a little bit more about what that is. But all these examples on the left are cases where the main treatment has been inactivation of phosphorus, making phosphorus unavailable for algae growth. We also have on the right some other technologies that have been applied. Oxygenation and aeration. are both typically applied to increase the amount of dissolved oxygen at the bottom of the lake. We're talking about how when you have low or no dissolved oxygen at the bottom of the lake, that's when you typically have elevated internal loading. When Ariel presented the slide on the sediment phosphorus, a high amount of that sediment phosphorus was in what we call iron-bound form, which is the main form that is available for growth when you get low dissolved oxygen conditions. So that those technologies, oxygen generation, is what we focused on. And then there's a few other methods applied, including floating ions and slug mixers. So a lot of studies have been out there, and these have been the most commonly applied. So what we're essentially three parts of the solution. First off, we're talking about removal of the activation of phosphorus from the water column on an annual basis. So this is really getting at that 72% Ariel talked about from Lacamas Creek, and also about 9% coming from the other creeks. So about 80% overall is what we're calling external loading, not coming from the sediment, but coming from external sources. And point number one here is really treating that, removing that phosphorus, making it unavailable for algal growth on an annual basis. Point two here is actually focused on that loading from the sediments. So as Ariel mentioned, it's not a majority, but it is a meaningful percentage of the phosphorus budget. That measurement is more uncertain than some of our external loadings. So, it's not exactly 20%, it's 20% with some error bars. Still, we're comfortable in saying that the sediment and phosphorus is enough of a portion of the sediment of the phosphorus budget that we need to think about. So what we're proposing in over approximately 5 to 10 years, we do focus on inactivating some of that phosphorus that is in the sediments. So we'll talk a little bit more about that as well. But really, point two is kind of focused on that 20%, especially in the deepest areas of the lake. So the deepest areas of the lake are the areas that go anoxic, that have the lowest dissolved oxygen. And so those are the areas where we're really focused on for inactivating that sediment phosphorus. And then finally, number three is sort of the long-term solution, right? Where we're all here talking about ways of reducing loading of phosphorus from the watershed. And I consider this symposium a key part of that, right? So we're all getting together and talking about strategies. But as we know, some of these strategies for reducing watershed loading are long-term. And so to see reduced algal blooms, fewer signs posted on the lakes, and better recreational opportunities, we do think 1 and 2 are important in the near term. So going into each of those three. So first, annual removal of phosphorus from the water column using either alum or Utrostored C, WC. So aluminum sulfate is, or alum, some of you may know this as a chemical added for water treatment, to form blocks and spill out to the bottom of the lake. So this has been probably the most applied technology for reducing phosphorus in lakes in Washington State. It does, depending on the required dose of alum, which is often determined using jar testing, it can have an effect on the lake pH, and in some cases it needs to be buffered to keep the pH in a safe range. So that is actually one factor that can control the cost for an alum application, whether or not the dose is just high enough that it needs to be buffered to maintain a safe pH range. But it's been applied in numerous lakes in Washington safely and effectively. So this is one of the again, probably the most commonly applied technology for this type of lake management. Utrostored WC is a more recent product, believed to have a lower risk of aquatic organisms. It would need it was a proprietary mix that would be either fully quality approval or an experimental permit. It's undergoing a process to get that quality approval, but it doesn't have it yet. But it's a project that is specifically targeted at water column treatments and inactivation of phosphorus from the water column. We are recommending initially focusing on Lacamas Lake for treatment. A couple of reasons for that. First is it's upstream of Round Lake, and we think that it's worth examining whether we have benefits to Round Lake as well from focusing on Lacamas Lake. It's also the lake that gets, that we hear about the most, I guess, in most instances. We are certainly recommending you continue to evaluate Round Lake and looking to see if you do get benefits from Round Lake by initially focusing on Lacamas Lake. But for those reasons, we are recommending focusing on Lacamas Lake initially. And our estimated costs have a fairly wide range for this annual treatment. And again, that's largely dependent on whether you need to buffer alum. An unbuffered alum treatment is in general going to be cheaper than to sort of WC treatment. But depending on the level of you need and whether you need buffering, it can be more expensive in some cases. Thanks a lot. I always do that where I point at the projector, but that's actually not where anything's being controlled. So it turns out to not work very well. So now we're moving on to point 2 in that 3-part strategy, which again is focused on controlling the loading from the sediments, that internal loading. And what we're really recommending there is, again, similar idea. Inactivation of the phosphorus in the bottom, not removing it, not making it not exist. It's the phosphorus is still there. You're really focusing on making it in a form that's unavailable route. And alum, again, is commonly used for this as well. And then Nutrisoil T is a lanthanum modified bentonite product. You may have heard of phosphate, which is a lanthanum modified bentonite. Bentonite is clay. Lanthanum is an element on the periodic table. That basically random modified bentonite has been shown to be able to effectively bind phosphorus and make it unavailable essentially permanently. Nutrisoil G is very similar to phosphate, also relatively new technology. It has more lanthanum than phosphate, so in theory you need less of the product to achieve the same phosphorus inactivation. We're recommending focusing on this portion of Lacamas Lake initially. Again, same idea of focusing on Lacamas Lake first over the other lakes because we want to see if we see benefits for both Lacamas and Round Lake and focusing on the upstream lake. And again, we're recommending focusing on the deepest portions of the lake because that's where you get the most periods of low or no dissolution. There is where most likely to get that internal load. So to control the dosage, which reduces the potential adverse impacts, and to really extract the improvements, we're recommending an activation of these deepest areas of sediments over a period of 5 to 10 years, sort of to allow for adaptive management. This is also the smaller portion of that phosphorus pie chart, and so we think it makes sense to work on it over a longer period of time. So the costs here are higher. This is the annual cost of about $300,000 per year for the 5-year treatment. If you did it over 10 years, it would be a smaller annual cost, but similar total cost. And that's because there's a lot of phosphorus in the bottom of the lakes, right? So inactivating it would be a significant expense. But we do think it is important to consider it because that 20% is enough of a factor that ignoring it could lead to less improvement than we're looking for. So then this is a big part of things we recommend in the watershed. These are a lot of things we've been talking about all day today, and I want to point out some of these are things that are already happening. So both the city and the county do a lot of work on stormwater optimization. We have agriculture PMPs. we talked about the Park Conservation District, Department of Ag, or key partners for making sure there's improvements on agricultural land. We have septic systems. The county has a robust septic system program. We heard talk about stream restoration and Gates talk on riparian restoration. And then constructed wetlands is something that could be evaluated if there was a site and all of that could be quite costly. And then finally, public education and efforts like this, I think, are critical to achieve our long-term objectives of reducing watershed pollution to the point where we would need to do additional inlet treatment. Right, that's what we'd love to be long-term, where no inlet treatment is necessary to achieve the type of lake water quality that we're looking for. But again, on a short-term basis, we do think inlet treatments are needed to have the recreation we want to see. So, I think we've heard this all day. Continued collaboration is going to be critical. I mentioned to Galen that I used the word alternative restoration plan as recently as the week ago, so I still have it on the slide. But I've been assured that recent change to call it the advanced restoration plan. So it's not something that's been wrong for too long. But this is the same advanced restoration plan that will be called to working on. And that will really help identify critical areas and programs for watershed treatments. So I know there's also interlocal discussion happening between the city and the county for continued partnership. Significant work has already been done, and we also talked about seeking funding jointly in the future as well. So I do want to highlight that we have some additional recommendations for consideration. I want to highlight continued monitoring there. There's a few different reasons for that, right? One is to track your progress or whether you're seeing benefits. It's also important for actually in and around an alcohol treatment, for example. Monitoring to ensure that the pH is staying in the safe range, but then you're also achieving the reduction in water phosphorus that you're looking for. So two different reasons to be monitoring. One, to evaluate and control what this look like. Two, to make sure that you're seeing the benefits and improvements that you're looking for. We think that a floating wetland pilot project could have value in terms of achieving overall reduction in phosphorus in the lakes. You need quite a large floating wetland to see a dramatic change, but it still may be worth considering for community projects where you have basically a pilot project that community can get involved in. Could be really valuable from a public education perspective as well. So it's worth evaluating. And then, as I mentioned a few times, continued public education and events like this are really key. So, I did have a summary of the cost of what we're proposing here. So what we're proposing here is an approximate cost of about $4.1 million over 10 years. And these are plain old costs. We talked about some of the factors that determine what it's going to look like, including whether they need to buffer and all those things like that. But that is roughly what the cost we're looking at. So there was a direct grant through the state capital budget of about $515,000. So that's roughly the cost for about 1 year of this plan, right? So there definitely will be need for additional funding to achieve all the recommendations that we discussed about. I'm going to go through these fairly quickly, but we did evaluate a number of other options that we're not recommending at this time. So one is essentially a treatment system at the Lacamas Creek inflow. This makes a lot of sense given that Lacamas Creek is, the dominant factor in the iceberg. Essentially, it would be a similar idea to the inlet treatments, but there would be additional likely construction, design, permitting costs, and also time to develop that system, and the cost will not be lower than inlet treatment. And so, just from a cost and time perspective, we think it makes sense to pursue the inlet treatments rather than the treatment at Lacamas Creek at studies right now. We did look into different types of aeration and oxygenation. So traditional hypolimitic oxygenation or aeration can be quite variable in its cost, but they would be substantial. And importantly, you would only be treating that 20% of sediment phosphorus loading. And in some cases, even without oxygenation, there are still pockets of, small pockets of no oxygen, which can still have internal loading. So because of the high potential design costs, only treating the 20%, and then also there's some potential to this oxygenation to mix those characteristics, to mix that high nutrient at the bottom of the lake with the lower nutrient, and the top of the lake. And so that's why we're not recommending that this time. Nanobubblr is newer and promising technology for basically achieving some of the same benefits with a more efficient oxygen transfer. And so this is something that is worth keeping an eye on. This technology kind of gets proved out. There's not an example that I'm aware of an application on a lake of this size in Washington State used frequently on golf course ponds. And so some of the safety reasons that you would need, some of the same reasons why we're not recommending at this time, you'll only be looking at about 20%. There would be some potential for some small pockets to remain anoxic, still have ability. But we do think it's worth keeping an eye on this technology for long-term advantage. We're not recommending it at this time. And then a whole range of other things that we did consider that I'm not going to go into this time. We can look at with questions. So outside, car removal, limiting motor uses areas of the lake, dredging, ultrasound treatment, and whole mixing of the water. So finally, last slide, next steps. We are receiving feedback on the draft lake management plan, and this is posted on that have amazing comments. The county did a really great review that we're going to incorporate as well. Providing additional opportunity for comments, including this symposium. And then we're going to incorporate that information submitted to ecology, then incorporate ecology feedback and lead to a final plan, which will then, as Steve mentioned, open up some additional funding and grant opportunities to be pursued. And then we envision, these first treatments happening spring or early summer 2024. So we want to be out there doing these treatments next year. So with that, I think we're ready to take up. Maybe not as much time as we.
Round of applause for Steve. You actually have to turn because lunch is still on the way, but we're very close to having lunch. So I think we can take questions for our normal amount of time if you're planning for while we're waiting for lunch. So just like last time, if folks could come up to the front to ask questions, that way you can make sure you're on the mic, and for our viewers online, also staying close to this mic. All right, first one.
Hi, thank you. Introduce yourself. Oh, I'm Rose. I work for State of Missouri. You guys students waterside monitoring for Strauss County. And my question was about early on in the presentation, there was a slide listing a bunch of other Washington lakes that have gone through the Avalon treatment. And then you mentioned that there's a chance of having to buffer to wildlife. And I'm just wondering, out of the lakes that were looked at, if any were in as close proximity to the sewer lakes. And this is we stop thinking of lakes, also think about further down the watershed, then we'll bring it to Washington River. And at a point where it's just beginning to erode or downtown. So I'm just kind of curious about if there was any data looking into that?
Yeah, I can take that at least partially. So I do know that in some of these examples, well, in many of these examples, the potential toxicity of alcohol outside is to be trained has been considered. And actually, at least one of the cases is that like that's been one of the reasons why I chose to go with the use sort of logging use sort of product. You know, the North Atlantic Management Association has a policy on how it's considered safe and has been used, you know, at many of these lakes safely and has been with considerable follow-up. So in terms of like the specific question on which of these proximity that's going to be now, but I know that it has been taken into account, and in some cases, because a really high dose we use, you know, there's different cases than me. But you know, there's laws that you can look up from both Washington State and National Association on state ballot applications and you know, long-term policies. Some of these are 20 years old or so, and so we do have ongoing data. Some of them are more recent.
Yeah, I like that. The ongoing lines and pieces deep, right? So when we started this effort, we wanted to be impactful. That means if we're going to monitor along the way, you know, upstream through our partners, downstream in lake, and we're going to, you know, we want to see if these treatments are effective. It also, that same vein doesn't mean that, you know, all of those options, like I said, you know, the reason why we would not recommend it at this time, even, you know, all of these options, whether it's aeration or any of these others on this, you know, broader list, those are all things that can happen as we move into the future, right? So the ongoing monitoring can be key. That includes the habitat side, make sure that what's going on downstream is still good, right? Not doing any damage downstream. And then if it, you know, if the plan for the monitoring case that we change tax, that's what we want to do, right? We want to adapt to something else if we have to.
Great question.
Hi, Carolyn. I work for Park Conservation. Oh, yes.
Yes. My question is, what does alum application look like in practice? Like, can you paint a picture of that?
Yeah, thanks for that question. It's a great question. So when we're talking about, we are talking about this slurry, you know, so this is like describing around the lake, and it's applying alcohol, like I said, as a slurry. So it's you know, not to avoid the boat, but in terms of safety for the lake, it's very safe. You can use the lake, you know, basically as soon as the application is done, as long as you're okay, the boat wants to be doing this treatment. But that is what it looks like. So, you know, all applications can't take different forms. You know, I've got a slide on injection at Lacamas Creek, so it can be injected into a creek as well. But in the injection we're talking about, we're looking at a boat that's basically shooting out slurry to the rest of the boat.
My name is Josh Sheets, local resident and member of the Clark County Clean Water Advisory Commission for a couple more months. So my question is about source control. Looks like the vast majority of the levy comes in through Lacamas Creek. And from what I saw, it's mainly public outreach and education. That's the solution there. So, or the proposed approach. So, I guess my question is, you know, the alum treatment and aeration are sort of stopping arterial bleeding, but it's not going to solve the problem. So what's going to be done besides education outreach on the source end? And is that going to include looking at development patterns? Camas is turning a lot of pasture and so on. That's a kind of a nutrient sink, essentially, into suburban housing that is a major nutrient source.
I just want to make a quick point, and not that like it's one hotspot. It's kind of training a very wide watershed. So I think that's a key point. That's why it's the dominant source, but that doesn't mean it's possible. So I think in terms of those recommendations, focusing, a lot of that was focusing on what we see the city as we develop this management plan as along with the city. But I think in this room, we've been talking about what their solutions look like and that we follow from that. So I'm going to ask to Steve.
Yeah, that's it actually, right? That's part of what we're all here, which is to have that discussion and continue that work that has been happening. That's part of, again, part of our education back out to the community has been that there have been activities happening, right? The county's role in stormwater and agricultural and the partnerships with Florida Conservation Districts and Smart Clark, right? There's all kinds of activities that have been happening upstream in the watershed. And those are, again, that's why we're here, right? We want to continue those discussions and keep that moving forward. The city, likewise, right, with the county, we have our stormwater management program that we have. We have an NPDES permit for the city. Those are things internally within the city that we can help improve conditions in the watershed and in place by those mechanisms, right? But again, those are things that are happening. And I think one of the messages that I would convey to the group is that we want to continue to support and enhance all of those programs as much as we can, right? Because that's going to ultimately get us there long term to the point where hopefully we don't have to do this treatment in the lake. We've got the water schedule we want it. The water's clean as it's coming down through the creeks and into the lake.
And I'd also just take the chance to speak on behalf of the county. We do acknowledge that we are over 80% of the watershed jurisdiction, and the county has a big role to play in the future of reducing pollutant loading to Lacamas Lake. And so we've been looking internally at what we think our current level of investment is, and we can confidently say that our programs are investing approximately $750,000 annually in stormwater related activities around inspections, maintenance of our infrastructure, but we also have our team out monitoring. That does not include public education and outreach, but one of the things we've identified that we can do is everything that has been installed in the Lacamas watershed from a stormwater perspective since the 90s should have phosphorus removal BMPs implemented. And our staff has been, one of the things we know we can do is go out and inventory all of our stormwater facilities to make sure that those phosphorus removal BMPs are still working. And if they're not, prioritize them for retrofit to help remove phosphorus loading. We're also partnering with Clark Conservation District to continue supporting microbial source tracking, which is DNA testing to identify if sources are coming from livestock or human or dogs so that we can best target outreach and financial and technical assistance in the watershed. So there's a few different ways that we can approach this, and we also have our stacker legacy lands in here. I just want to acknowledge Kevin Tyler and Danielle Cowley. The county does invest a significant amount of money in purchasing and preserving land for restoration. So there is also a reforestation component to reduce temperatures, and that is a role that the county is interested in playing and working in partnership with Watershed Alliance, the Lacamas City Watershed Council and Conservation District, and others. Lower Columbia partnerships here, who does a lot of restoration work. That will be a big part of the puzzle moving forward.
Just wanted to also bring back the point. So when we're looking at the phosphorus loading in Lacamas Creek, that's based on measurements at Goodwin Road. And everything that's coming into Goodwin Road is what you heard earlier, like Shanghai Creek, Fifth Plain Creek, China Ditch. And so the work that the county and ecology are doing is directly looking at what solutions, where are the major problems up in the watershed. That advanced restoration plan is picking out specific locations where we can use, where we can implement solutions to improve
the water quality upstream, which will then trickle down to the river.
Thank you. All right, if you do have a question, please take a couple more and then lunch is here. Next to you. You can introduce yourself, please.
Hello, I'm John Green. I noticed, and that's the perfect slide, that there was no sampling of the water at the golf course or at the Lacamas Shores biofilter. I kind of feel like the movie Star Wars, and Obi-Wan says, these are not the droids you're looking for. Those appear to me to be the obvious places where we ought to be looking first, in addition to identifying other sources.
I can start and then Justin to speak, but the first thing I want to mention, Wire Creek is the major drainage for the golf course. So most of the runoff from the golf course will be captured with that Wire Creek sample. The other point is it is a numbers game with respect to flow. So we tried to pick the locations where the largest amount of area is being drained into Lacamas Creek. So there are many other locations that could be sampled where there is water coming in. But when you multiply that flow by that concentration, that max number is what makes the difference.
Yeah, the other thing, from the city's perspective, when we were scoping this effort, we had to essentially work with the consultant team to play that numbers game. And Ariel talked about the numbers game from a concentration standpoint of pollutants. I'll talk about the numbers game from a budget perspective because that was my role in that discussion. It's very expensive to do the field work and test in this type of effort, and they can test better than I can. But we had a limited amount of budget working with council and through our grant processes. And so part of this, when I got the first scope back from Geosyntax, I looked at it and thought, this is way beyond. And when we looked at the numbers, it was the sampling and testing, right? So we found a balance, like Ariel mentioned, of the areas where we had the most flow, the most concentration coming in. That's how these areas were selected, right? It's a balance between budget and being able to figure out where the most likely sources were. It does not mean that monitoring, right? Again, we talk about monitoring the importance moving forward. There's all kinds of reasons for the additional monitoring, right? It's to determine if what we're proposing and what we're implementing is working. It's also going to be other areas, right, that potentially we didn't get to in the first round. And so this is an ongoing process, but I think, again, we're pretty comfortable with what we've got. If you look at the percentages, right, the areas that we didn't capture from a direct flow are very, very, very small percentage of the big picture when we look at it. That's the ultimate message, I think.
Fantastic. And we have one more question from online. And then just for those of you who are online, I know there are quite a few questions. We apologize that we weren't able to get to all of them. We will be sending out an FAQ after this to make sure we answer those questions. So please keep them coming. We are able to address one before we go to lunch.
All right. Is there anything planned to help the lake ecosystem at the algae/macro invertebrate level to help them bounce back from the cyanobacteria takeover?
So the question basically is about, there are different types of algae. Cyanobacteria is one form. There's also green algae, datums, a number of types. I think the question is getting at anything planned specifically at helping different types of algae take over. I mean, so the short answer is not specifically focused on that item. A lot of these items that we're talking about where you're reducing the nutrient availability is going to help in general with the lake water quality ingredients from eutrophic down to mesotrophic. So basically a healthier lake level in general. And that should in general help with the amount of House and Senate process. But none of the items we're proposing are specifically focused only on changing the type of policy that is
Great. I'm sure everyone's hungry, but before we do that, just a big round of applause to. Thank you again, and I know that you may have more questions. We do have an hour for, well, about 45 minutes for lunch now, where we can follow up individually. But I do want to go over some quick lunch, backup slides, look at all those. I do want to go over some lunch logistics. So thank you, Steve. Thank you, Mayor Hogan. Thank you, everybody at Lacamas for that well done presentation. So everyone's favorite time, lunch.